Everyone who grew up watching fantasy movies has had the exact same dream, getting that Hogwarts letter or stumbling upon a magical wardrobe that leads to Narnia. We love the idea of a perfect secret world where magic fixes every problem and turns our mundane lives into a massive, epic adventure. But what if magic wasn't some wonderful gift, but a chaotic force born purely out of your pain and trauma? That's exactly the gut punch you get when you watch The Magicians. Basically, it's like Harry Potter for young adults, full of reckless people in desperate need of therapy. But the show is so much more than just a dark, edgy fairy tale. It has a unique bite to it, featuring characters who fail miserably at life, and it delivers a harsh truth. Magic doesn't heal your mind or resolve your inner conflicts. In fact, it usually makes absolutely everything worse. Today, we're diving headfirst into the insane journey of the Magicians, because finding out the magical world actually exists might just be your worst nightmare. Quentin Coldwater is the kind of guy who'd rather live inside a fantasy book than face the real world. He just got out of a psychiatric hospital and is heading to a Yale alumni interview with his best friend, Julia. But when they get there, the interviewer is dead, and a mysterious paramedic uses the confusion to hand Quentin an unpublished manuscript of his favorite book. From there, reality short circuits. A page blows away. Quentin chases after it, and before he knows it, he's no longer in New York. He has crossed over to Brakebills, a secret university upstate. Julia arrives moments later, and the two are thrown into an entrance exam for the magical world. Quentin passes, but Julia fails. When a professor tries to wipe her memory, Julia sneakily cuts her own arm with a ring. The pain and the scar will ensure she doesn't think it was just a dream. While Julia goes back home and is recruited by a secret society of hardcore underground hedge witches, Quentin starts his new life. He meets the sarcastic Elliot, the gossip queen Margot, the hot-headed Penny, and Alice, a prodigy who is at the school with a single goal: to find out how her brother died there 5 years ago. To help Alice, Quentin, and the other first years perform a summoning spell using a stolen book. And as anyone who has ever seen a horror movie knows, instead of Alice's brother, the mirror reveals a man with his face covered by moths. Time freezes. The creature, known as the Beast, hurts the dean's eyes, kills a professor with a simple gesture, and slowly walks up to Quentin, revealing that he knows exactly who he is. The Beast's attack leaves Brakebills in a state of absolute panic. The monster escaped after Penny broke the mirror, but the damage is done. Dean Fogg survived but lost his sight, and the school goes into Inquisition mode to find out who opened the door for the creature. Quentin is terrified at the thought of being expelled and sent back to his empty life. Elliot tries to calm him down with a brutal truth of their world. Magic doesn't come from talent, it comes from pain. Makes sense. Far away, in New York, Julia is undergoing a sadistic initiation test with the hedge witches. She and another newbie, Marina, are locked inside an abandoned meat locker. The solution seems obvious for someone with magic, but Julia notices the trick and simply uses a pair of scissors to unscrew the door. The test reveals two things. Not every problem is solved with magic, and Marina isn't a scared newbie. She's the ruthless leader of the group, and she's just adopted Julia as her new protege. Back at Brakebills, tensions boil over. Quentin uses battle magic against Penny. The spell ricochets, and both end up in the infirmary. That's when the specialist called in to wipe Quentin's mind finally arrives. To his surprise, it's Eliza, the paramedic from New York. Instead of expelling him, she gives him a reality check. Quentin doesn't have a grand heroic destiny and isn't a prodigy, but since the Beast looked right at him, he'd better stay and learn to fight as fast as possible. Dean Fogg is back, now wearing bizarre magical glasses to see, and it's time to sort the students into their disciplines. Alice masters light manipulation. Quentin, he gets the frustrating title of undetermined. Still, the two are placed in the same cottage and have to deal with an urgent problem. The campus fountain has started pulling students into the water with ghostly arms. Alice is sure it's the spirit of her brother Charlie. Quentin tries to help, but the school's focus is elsewhere. Penny is about to lose his mind from the voices in his head, and from the fact that he can hear Quentin mentally singing Taylor Swift. The stress is so high that Penny accidentally teleports to Shanghai. We discover he is a traveler, the rarest and most unpredictable magical discipline there is. Meanwhile, Elliot needs to recover a stolen book and uses the maid of the work to track it down. The book flies wildly to New York and leads them straight to the hedge witch's safe house, where the two tomes literally start mating. That's where Quentin and Julia reunite. The vibe is heavy. Quentin acts like an arrogant frat boy, telling her to give up the parlor tricks, while Julia, who is hooked on the power, proves she will do anything to stay in the magical world, even lying to her boyfriend that she joined Narcotics Anonymous to justify her absences. At night, Alice and Quentin go to the fountain to summon Charlie. The magic works, but the creature that emerges is no longer her brother. He has become a Niffin, an entity made of pure magic with no humanity left, which immediately attacks Alice. With no other option to save his friend, the protagonist uses a box designed to trap the monster.
Sunlight, Balakanisha. I find you!
Devastated at losing her brother for good, Alice packs her bags and leaves Brakebills. Quentin wakes up, but the setting has drastically changed. No magic or Brakebills. He's wearing sweatpants, has a medical ID bracelet on his wrist, and bars on the window. He is in a psychiatric hospital. To make matters worse, the attending psychiatrist says the school, the spells, and even the beast were just hallucinations caused by going off his meds. Quentin tries to conjure a mini sun in his hands to prove otherwise, but nothing happens. Despair sets in. The place is an absolute fever dream. Elliot is a patient begging for happy pills, Penny is an orderly, and Alice shows up swearing she's an alien who fell to Earth. When Dean Fogg tries to calm her down by saying she stole the plot of Lost in Space, Quentin can't help but correct him. It's an episode of Star Trek, Priorities. The big reveal comes when Julia shows up pretending to be his old friend from Yale. Quentin tries to cast a fireworks spell. No one reacts, except Julia, who asks to see the fireworks. Bingo. Quentin realizes this whole thing is a mental prison created by her. While mental Quentin sings Taylor Swift in music therapy to try to contact the real Penny, the situation in the real world is tense. Julia and Marina set up this nightmare spell not just for revenge, but to force Brakebills to lower its wards. Marina's plan is to break into the school and retrieve the memories stolen from her when she was expelled. Penny finally finds Quentin's body hidden in a closet and, with Fogg's help, enters the boy's mind just in time to stop him from undergoing imaginary brain surgery. But the rescue mission goes horribly wrong. Julia kicks Penny out of Quentin's mind. Luckily, the protagonist figures out what's going on, manages to break free, and wakes up. Back in reality, Dean Fogg makes it clear he's not going to hunt down Julia. To him, hedge witches end up self-destructing on their own, and he's not entirely wrong. As Julia is so desperate for magic, she ends up burning her own hands trying to cast random spells off the internet. At Brakebills, the vibe is a mix of a corporate networking event and the Hunger Games. It's Alumni Week, where everyone tries to impress in order to land a mentor. Margot and Elliot are obsessed with recruiting Alice's famous aunt, who finally agrees to return to the school. But Quentin can't focus on any of that. He just found out his dad has terminal brain cancer. Trying to find a magical cure, Quentin hits the harsh reality that magic doesn't fix everything. This frustration explodes during the Welters tournament, a sort of giant magical chess. Channeling all his pain and anger, Quentin unleashes a colossal spell that nearly destroys the board, but secures his team's victory. Ignoring warnings that magic can't cure diseases, he tries to apply what he's learned on the school's mascot, a 150-year-old dog nicknamed the Cancer Puppy. The result? He accidentally kills the dog. It's a brutal lesson, which leads him to finally accept reality and reveal his powers to his dad in a touching scene, using magic to assemble an old toy airplane. Meanwhile, Julia's life falls apart. She tries to get back with her fiancé James, but he looks at her like she's a stranger. Marina wiped the guy's memory, forcing Julia to cut her last ties to normalcy. The story's real breakthrough comes with Penny, training astral projection so he doesn't have to physically travel around and risk losing a leg like his mentor. He follows a mysterious voice to a dungeon. There, he finds a chained girl and comes face to face with none other than the Beast. Penny wakes up in a panic and draws the symbol he saw on the prison door. When Quentin lays eyes on the drawing, the shock is immediate. It's Ember's crest. The dungeon isn't on Earth. Penny traveled to Fillory. With the revelation that Fillory is real, Alice tries to convince Penny to study the children's books in case he gets pulled back there. He remains in total denial and opts to get a protective tattoo against the Beast instead.
Hey, breakfast is good.
Outside the safe walls of the school, Julia continues her downward spiral into the magical underground. She teams up with Hannah, a witch who is also screwed over by Marina, and who, by coincidence, is Katie's mother. The two try to break into Marina's safe to steal spells but fall into a deadly trap. The pages are blank, and the security wards brutally kill Hannah, adding more blood to the street witch's hands. At Brakebills, the atmosphere turns into a life-threatening fraternity hazing. The upperclassmen kidnap the first years for the trials. a traditional rite of passage where failure means immediate expulsion. The first phase involves decoding an impossible spell. Since Quentin and Penny have no chance playing fair, Penny uses his astral projection to cheat directly off Alice's test. Practical and efficient. In the second phase, Quentin barely has time to process his theories about Fillory before being knocked out by Margot. The group wakes up in the middle of a forest, completely without magic, given random tasks like catching a fish, taming a white horse, and chopping down a tree. They soon realize the tools they were given are swapped, and by working as a team, they manage to pass the test. But it's the final trial that breaks everyone. They have to go without clothes and confess their darkest truths. Vulnerability peaks. Penny admits he's in love, while Katie confesses she was just using him. Alice reveals her constant fear of being unlikable, and Quentin puts it out there that he deeply hates himself and has spent his life running away. With their souls cleansed, the binding spells break, and their reward for passing the freshman year is exotic, to say the least. They all transform into geese and fly away. We arrive in Antarctica, and the students are literally in the skin of geese. Professor Mayakovsky wastes no time with pleasantries. He steals everyone's voices and orders them to hammer a nail into a board using only magic. Quentin, being Quentin, spells out an insult with the nails and gets slapped in the face. The reward? A kiss from Alice. The training gets worse. They have to control insects with their minds, getting shocked with every mistake. Once they pass the test, Mayakovsky orders them to strip and throws them out into the freezing cold. Survival instinct kicks in, they turn into foxes to avoid dying, and, well, things heat up. Back inside and in human form, the two finally sleep together. Meanwhile, Penny also has his moment of growth. Mayakovsky helps him master teleportation, revealing that his tattoo was blocking his power. Penny travels to Florida, a desert, and a volcano all in one go. Excited, he enters Katie's mind and discovers her drama with Marina. His idea is to rob Mayakovsky to pay off her debt, but the professor catches Katie red-handed. Mayakovsky lets her know her mother died, meaning she is free from Marina, but also expelled from Breakbill. Katie leaves in silence, ensuring Penny stays at the university without coming after her. Far from there, Elliot and Margot try to summon a djinn to sponsor a magical party in Ibiza, but end up summoning a real djinn. A student named Mike helps with the spell and ends up sleeping with Elliot. Everything seems great until Mike sees a bizarre moth and his eyes glow blue. And Julia? She gets out of jail because Hannah's death was ruled natural. Her sister picks her up, throws it in her face that she's acting like their drunk father, and warns her that their mother just wants to sweep it under the rug to maintain her reputation. Rock Bottom seems to have a basement. Back on campus, Quentin and Alice agree to take things slow after the Fox incident in Antarctica. The semester ramps up, study groups are formed, and Quentin manages to switch places so he can be on the same team as Alice and Penny. But the academic vibe doesn't last long. Elliot's new boyfriend, Mike, is completely possessed. In the woods, while Quentin and Penny practice spells and bicker, Mike appears out of nowhere and attacks Quentin with the dagger. Penny jumps in to save his friend and ends up stabbed, while Quentin throws Mike back with battle magic. Fogg locks Mike in a spell-proof room for interrogation, but the guy swears he doesn't remember a thing. In the infirmary, Penny's cut isn't normal. A black, creeping vine starts growing under his skin, threatening to reach his heart. Quentin recognizes the curse from the Fillory books, the Virgo Blade. To save his friend, he discovers via Jane Chatwin herself that they need to burn Penny's most prized possession. Alice and Quentin search his room and burn a candy wrapper from Antarctica, the only comforting memento Katie left behind. The vines disappear instantly. Meanwhile, Jane's situation spirals out of control. She enters the warded room to confront Mike, but he isn't there by chance. He was waiting for her. In a split second of pure brutality, he strangles her to death, escapes, knocks out Dean Fogg, and ends up being killed by Elliot himself, who arrives just in time to see his possessed boyfriend murder. For Julia, the scenery is different. In a rehab clinic, she meets Richard, a chaplain and Breakbill's trained magician. He teaches her that magic isn't a drug, it's a tool. He teaches her a prayer that makes her levitate in pure peace, proving there is another path besides Marina's dark underworld. The protagonist asks Fogg what to do now that Jane is dead. The Dean's answer is simple and devastating. The beast is going to come back, and everyone is going to die. Hopeless, Quentin and Alice decide the best response to the apocalypse is to go up to his room together. Quentin and Julia try to patch things up by trading apology emails, but each has their own mission now. Julia, guided by Richard, astral projects to help Kira, a paralyzed girl trapped in her own mind after teaching herself magic. Kira gives Julia a valuable spell, and as a final favor for her redemption, redemption, asks Julia to kill her, and she fulfills the request. On the flip side, Quentin is obsessed with finding the 6th Fillory book, which supposedly holds all the answers about the beast. Penny confesses he found the book, read it, and threw it away, but he remembers a crucial detail, a magic button that took Jane Chatwin to Fillory. The clue leads them straight to England, to the manor of Christopher Plover, the author of the books. What seemed like a literary field trip quickly turns into a nightmare. The manor's tour guide is found dead with his mouth sewn shut, and the group starts having ghostly visions of the past. The illusions reveal the dark truth behind the children's fables. Plover was a traveler with strange compulsions, obsessed with reaching Fillory. To cover her brother's tracks, Plover's sister murdered 2 people in the house. Martin had the portal opening button and, to protect it, gave it to one of the victims to hide. Piecing it together, Quentin comes to a terrifying conclusion. The beast isn't just some random otherworldly monster, it is Christopher Plover himself, who did whatever it took to master the portals. They head down to the basement of the manor and retrieve the button from the pocket of the corpse. Back in the safety of the Breakbills' cottage, the group barely has time to catch their breath. Penny touches the magic button and in the blink of an eye completely vanishes. Penny emerges gasping for air from a fountain in a bizarre place with 3 moons in the sky. He runs into a girl named Eve. She seems friendly, the classic welcoming committee, until Penny shows her the magic button he's carrying. The vibe instantly shifts. The girl attacks, and he has to teleport away. The problem is that the place, known as the Netherlands, is basically an endless labyrinth of fountains. With no way out, he uses astral projection to enter Quentin's dreams and beg for help. In the real world, Quentin gathers the gang to try and rescue their friend, except the rescue team isn't in the best shape. Elliot is completely high, and Margot discovers her life force is being drained. The culprit? Her ex-boyfriend, who created a golem in her exact image to keep forcing his love on her. It's the peak of a bad breakup.
Starting to wear off. Margot.
While Margot resolves this personal nightmare, Quentin and Alice set off on an equally awkward mission. The only way to signal a path back for Penny is through a sex magic spell. And to get the instructions, Alice has to visit her parents, which involves interrupting a Roman orgy in the living room and asking her mother's lover for advice. After a lot of discomfort and bickering about their relationship, Quentin and Alice finally manage to synchronize the act. On the other side, things escalate. Penny falls into a massive library that holds the books of every person who has ever lived. The librarian helps him find a clue about the beast, but he's soon thrown back into the dangers of the fountains. Just as Eve's goons are closing in, a beacon shines. It's Quentin and Alice's spell working. Penny dives into the illuminated fountain and unexpectedly pops up in Alice's bedroom, right in the middle of their intimate moment. In parallel, Julia keeps sinking deeper into the magical underground. She and Katie join Richard's group for an insane task, breaking traditional rules, gathering energy through time magic, and attempting the impossible, summoning a god. With the threat of the beast breathing down their necks, the group realizes they urgently need to learn battle magic. They track down Katie, who pours a bucket of cold water over everyone's excitement. To cast battle spells, you have to completely empty your emotions, something that takes years of meditation, or, as she suggests, a dangerous shortcut. She teaches them a spell that literally bottles up the user's feelings, temporarily turning the group into empty shells so they can practice the basics. Away from school, Julia's quest for divine power continues. She and Katie track down Alamia, who takes the form of Katie's deceased mother and lives in squalor, only to warn them that the gods are dead and don't care about humanity. But Richard rejects this answer, and Julia soon gets a very clear sign that he is right. The goddess Persephone herself appears in her kitchen, handing her a map and a mission: find an ancient servant, deliver 3 gifts, and prove her worth. Back with the Breakbills students, the bottled emotions spell takes its toll. When they finally let their pent-up feelings back into their bodies, the impact is devastating. The emotional payload is so heavy that Alice and Elliot pass out on the spot. Margot and Quentin stay awake, long enough for her to confess how much she envies his genuine belief in magic. The vulnerable atmosphere takes over, the two hug, and the situation evolves into a kiss. The next morning, the physical and emotional hangover hits hard. Quentin opens his eyes and realizes he is in bed next to Margot and Elliot. Chaotic flashbacks start popping into his head, showing that last night he didn't just stop at kissing Margot, but also hooked up with Elliot. And to make the scene a nightmare come to life, Alice is sitting right there, on the edge of the bed, fully dressed and quietly watching the wreckage. The moral hangover at the cottage is heavy. The vibe between Quentin, Alice, Margot, and Elliot is unbearable. Alice drops a dry "we're done" to Quentin's face, place and drowns herself in booze. But the end of the world waits for no breakups. The group bottles their emotions again, activates the magic button, and jumps to the Netherlands. The plan fails in record time. Eve attacks. Quentin is thrown back to Earth, and the other four fall straight into the library. Desperate, Quentin uses truth serum on Dean Fogg and discovers something brutal. Eliza was actually Jane Chatwin, and she manipulated time, creating 39 loops in an attempt to stop the beast. In all of them, Quentin and his friends died. Because Jane was murdered by the enemy, the clock has stopped rewinding. This is the final attempt with no safety net. Out of options, Quentin goes after Julia. Her group was completely successful. They summoned the goddess, cured a member's cancer, and proved they had reached another level of magic. Quentin swallows his pride and asks for help. They sneak into Brakebills and discover their best bet is to use time magic to retrace the Chatwin siblings' original steps. In the Netherlands, the group is banned from the library after Elliot burns a book in a fit of grief.
What are you doing?
Putting the past behind me.
No, stop! Wait!
Wandering lost among the fountains, they bump into Josh Hoberman, a missing Brakebills student who survived an attack by the beast and knows where the Fillory fountain is. Alice uses magic to turn them invisible, a nearly perfect stealth plan if Elliot wasn't high on psychedelic carrots. He blows their cover, but Margot handles the ambush in the most practical way possible, pulling out a gun and shooting the enemy. The quartet dives into the fountain. Meanwhile, Quentin and Julia use the time portal, landing in 1942 London to the sound of wartime air raid sirens. They watch young Jane Chatwin step into a phone booth, follow right behind her, and the doors open to the impossible. They step out of a tree into a sunlit woodland with towers in the distance. They finally made it to Fillory, literally living through the pages of their favorite childhood book. They meet young Martin Chatwin and decide to help him find the Leo Blade to defeat the villain Christopher Plover. But their nostalgic trip is cut short by the Watcher woman, who reveals herself to be an older, embittered version of Jane Chatwin. She warns them that this is her final time loop to try and fix things, gives them some cryptic advice, and sends them straight back to 2016. Present-day Fillory is gray and lifeless, destroyed by the beast. The Brakebills crew reunites, but getting the Leo Blade requires a massive sacrifice. One of them must marry the blacksmith's daughter. Elliot passes the magic blood test and steps up to the plate, sealing a commitment that traps him in that world forever. Since the blade is too hot for a normal human to hold, Quentin and Julia go to the god Ember to ask for strength. The horned god offers his divine essence in a suspicious white flask. Yes, it's exactly what you're thinking. Worse than the flask humiliation, Ember breaks the spell, blocking Julia's memories. The truth hits her like a punch to the gut. The goddess she thought she summoned was actually the trickster god Reynard. He massacred her Hedgewitch group, murdered her friend, and hurt her, leaving behind a brutal trauma that Marina tried to erase. Thirsty for revenge and with murder in her eyes, Julia asks Quentin to help her kill Reynard. Quentin hands over the blade and Ember's divine juice to Alice, who has way more combat talent, and the group invades the cabin at the wellspring. Inside, the mask slips. The beast isn't Plover, it's the adult Martin Chatwin himself, corrupted by drinking all the magic from the wellspring. The confrontation is an absolute disaster. Martin quickly overpowers the group and takes Penny out of the fight. When all seems lost, Julia appears behind Martin with the blade to his throat, but instead of saving her friends, she makes a deal with the villain. The two vanish into thin air, leaving the rest of the group bleeding out on the floor. With the group decimated and Penny bleeding buckets, Quentin runs desperately for help. Luckily, the godlike powers Alice absorbed are still active, and she manages to heal everyone before the worst happens. But the victory tastes like defeat. They discover Martin has drained all the energy from the wellspring. If the beast returns, there won't be enough magic left to fight back. Meanwhile, in New York, Julia and the beast are hashing out the terms of their macabre deal in a playground, with Martin watching the children play in a profoundly creepy way. The deal is simple. He helps her kill Reynard, and she hands over the Fillorian blade. The villain tries to convince Julia to give up her shade, the part of the soul that harbors empathy and pain, guaranteeing that the lack of feelings would make her ruthless. She refuses, preferring to keep her humanity for now. Back in Fillory, Penny and Margot find a river of healing waters. The guardian of the place actually sews Penny's hands back on, but since the stubbornly arrogant magician refuses to pay the required Reynard Price, the guy places a heavy curse on his wrists. At the same time, the group needs to make Elliot's reign official, since no one in the kingdom will lift a finger to help them without a legitimately crowned leader. The Knight of Crown's final test to prove earthly royalty is, bizarrely, 90s pop culture knowledge. Elliot delivers a dramatic monologue from the movie Dirty Dancing with such passion that he secures not only his own crown, but those of Margot, Alice, and Quentin as well.
High King Elliot, the spectacular.
There's even a brief moment of peace, culminating in a kiss between Quentin and Alice, though she makes it clear they aren't getting back together. Their hope for finding weapons lied in an old castle armory, but the place is completely empty. The only clue is a book suggesting that the final answer is back on Earth, at their very own university. Quentin says goodbye to Elliot, who tries to hide his sheer terror of being stranded in a monster-ruled world, fearing he might die of old age before his friends return. Quentin, Alice, Margot, and Penny escape back to Brakebills with an apocalyptic warning for Dean Fogg. If the beast completely drains the wellspring in Fillory, magic will disappear from all worlds. Their only salvation is learning battle magic, which was banned from the school years ago by a fairy professor named Nini Bigby. After solving a typical fairy riddle hidden in a silly anagram of a book called Hotel Spa Potions, they find the professor hiding out in Rhode Island. It becomes glaringly obvious that she and Fogg are exes with a lot of unresolved baggage. They convince Nini to hand over the Rhineman Ultra, a colossal spell that Alice can cast using what's left of her divine energy. The only catch is that the magic disintegrates anything within a 20-foot radius, no exceptions. Quentin goes to New York to warn Julia to keep her distance from the beast when the attack goes down. Speaking of which, Julia is living an absolute domestic nightmare, as Martin has become the worst roommate imaginable, singing opera around the house and devouring her snacks. To lure out the god Reynard, they need a hedge witch as bait. Martin kidnaps Marina, but Julia refuses to cross that line and lets her escape. However, Marina's escape is short-lived. After discovering that Reynard ripped out the heart of one of her allies in San Francisco and having her request for asylum coldly denied by Fogg, she shows up at Julia's door, finally willing to act as bait in the hunt for the murderous god. At the university, the group preps for war in an extreme way. They literally tattoo demons onto their backs, which can be unleashed as distractions on the battlefield. Penny also gets a permanent fix for the curse on his hands, thanks to Professor Sunderland. Meanwhile, Fillory is in chaos. Without the wellspring's energy, the crops are dying, and the locals know nothing about basic agriculture. Elliot then uses his best-kept secret to save the kingdom, the fact that he grew up on a farm. He rolls up his sleeves and teaches the people how to make fertilizer, and it's exactly as the crops begin to thrive that Quentin, Alice, Penny, and Margot appear in the throne room, armed, tattooed, and ready for the final showdown. The group is finally reunited in the Fillory throne room, but the relief lasts exactly 1 second. Turns out the thrones come with a factory-installed curse. Anyone who sits on them develops extreme paranoia and starts plotting the other's deaths. Elliot, Margot, Quentin, and Alice fall for it instantly, leaving Penny, who isn't king of anything, with the mission of saving the day. Penny's solution is surgical. Let the curse run its course and kill everyone, temporarily. He travels to Earth, returns with potassium chloride to stop their hearts, and Pulp Fiction-style adrenaline to revive the crew. The orderly execution plan goes down the drain when the four completely snap and start actually trying to kill each other, but Penny and Fen manage to revive them all and break the curse. With no time to breathe, they focus on taking down the beast. Alice's divine magic is running out. Penny travels, grabs Martin and Julia, and brings them right into the trap. Alice fires the Rhineman Ultra spell but narrowly misses the target, destroying only Martin's arm and left side before he manages to flee. The chase ends at the wellspring, which by the way has been ruined because the god Ember literally defecated in it. The final battle is chaotic. Quentin is severely injured. Alice, realizing her energy won't last, releases her power limiter. Quentin, Elliot, and Margot beg her to stop, but it's too late. She burns in blue flames and transforms into a Niffin. With her new, almost infinite power, she destroys the beast effortlessly. But a Niffin has no humanity. Alice turns to kill her own friends, forcing Quentin to release his Keiko D-Man to attack her. A blinding flash of light engulfs them, and when it fades, only Alice's lifeless body remains. While all this chaos was unfolding, Julia almost got her revenge. Marina had served as bait and lured Reynard to her apartment. Martin froze the god, and Julia was seconds away from plunging the Leo blade into him. But that was the exact moment Penny appeared, grabbed them both, and teleported them to Fillory. And since Penny's cursed hands completely lose their function right after, he gets stuck in New York, unable to take Julia back. When she finally rushes into the apartment, she finds only Marina's mutilated body. With Alice dead and Quentin severely injured, their recovery takes place at a centaur clinic in the woods. Penny is there too, but the healer refuses to touch him. The river's curse gave Penny's hands a mind of their own, and they are aggressively trying to strangle him. Things take a shocking turn when Quentin is forced to use an axe against his own friend. Again, as part of his physical therapy, Quentin practices archery. He ends up spotting the White Lady, a magical creature from the books who is bound to grant wishes if captured. Quentin lands an arrow on her and claims his prize. His first wish is to bring Alice back, but the lady warns him that she is truly gone. Penny chimes in and gets a brand new set of hands. The lady offers to erase Quentin's memory so he can be happy, but he refuses. He only asks to be sent home to New York. Meanwhile, the reality of ruling Fillory hits Elliot and Margot like a ton of bricks. Without the beast's influence and with the wellspring polluted, the kingdom is on the brink of rebellion. To deal with earthly problems without abandoning the throne, they create a golem with Elliot's mind. The plan makes sense until the golem goes to a party at Breakbills, sleeps with a visiting student, and the real Elliot, who was in bed with Fen in Fillory, receives all the mental feedback from the experience. Dean Fogg has to give the golem a reality check. Elliot needs to choose a life and act like an adult. On Earth, Julia finds Katie spiraling as she struggles to cope with her trauma. After Katie gets clean, the two investigate Marina's freeze-dried body and find a Breakbills library code carved into her arm. Since Katie was expelled, Julia breaks into the campus and, with unexpected help from Margot and Elliot's golem, copies the book. The spell is for temporary necromancy. They revive Marina for just a few minutes, giving the witch enough time to reveal one last hope. 40 years ago, a girl managed to banish Reynard from Earth, which means he can be banished again. New hands don't equate to working magic. Penny can move his fingers, but he can't cast a single spell. Dean Fogg's only hope for him is to send him back to Antarctica to ask Professor Mayakovsky for help. The eccentric Russian works Penny like a convict, untying giant knots and sanding down tables to dust, but it was all to charge a magical battery. Mayakovsky believes magic is dying along with the wellspring, and maybe it's the perfect time to abandon this life. Things are infinitely darker for Julia. She discovers she is pregnant. She and Katie schedule an abortion at a clinic, but Reynard won't let his spawn be discarded. The computer system deletes the appointment on its own, and when the doctor finally begins the procedure, she suddenly falls into a terrifying hypnotic trance and takes her own life right in front of Julia. It's a level of horror you can't easily walk away from. In Fillory, royalty remains chaotic. Fen receives a messenger rabbit informing her that she's pregnant, making Elliot a father. Before he can even process his paternal panic, his wine steward tries to assassinate him. The guy is part of Fillorians United, or the FU Fighters, as Margot brilliantly dubs them, an extremist group that wants to kill any Earthborn ruler. Margot wants an immediate execution. Elliot wants to be diplomatic and create a better world for his child. What Elliot doesn't know is that Fen had ties to this group, and now she's being blackmailed by the imprisoned assassin.
Emotional, easily wounded. Try and see, or help the cause.
If the Foo Fighters make another move, I'll kill you myself.
Far from all this madness, Quentin tries to embrace normalcy by working in a corporate office in New York. He runs into Emily Greenstreet, who also got a civilian job to escape the magical world. But running away is impossible. The two get drunk, go to Emily's apartment, and use an illusion spell to mask their pain. Quentin takes on Mayakovsky's face, Emily takes on Alice's, and they sleep together. The next morning, the moral hangover hits hard, and Quentin realizes that using magic to numb the grief only left him feeling emptier. And to make matters worse for his sanity, while walking the streets of New York, he sees Alice across the street, and then she simply vanishes. Reynard's baby has absolutely no intention of leaving. Katie walks in, panics at the sight of the body on the floor, and refuses to finish the job herself. Their alternative is to hunt down Dana Wallens, the woman who banished Reynard 40 years ago. Dana actually seems sympathetic at first, sharing the same trauma with the god, but her empathy runs out fast with a blow to the head. When Julia wakes up tied up in the basement, Dana drops a bombshell. The baby is a demigod, basically a nuclear reactor, and the only way to banish Reynard again is to harness the child's energy during birth. To make matters worse, Dana keeps keeps a Haxenpaxen down there, a giant creature that generates so much magical interference it hides the house from Reynard's radar. Katie breaks into the place, knocks Dana out, and escapes with Julia and the Beast. The problem is, without the creature, Dana's house is back on the map. And guess who shows up in her living room demanding answers? Reynard himself. Meanwhile, Quentin tries to cope with his grief the classic magician way, by trying to summon Alice's Niffen. Unsuccessful, he attends her memorial on Earth. Alice's father attempts a backyard ritual to free his daughter's soul, but falls off a ladder. The task falls to her mother, who, to complete the spell, must speak in absolute truth. She admits she never understood her daughter. The ritual works, but with a painful plot twist. Alice's Niffen wasn't trapped in the afterlife. The whole time, the monster had been confined inside Quentin's magical back tattoo. Back in Fillory, Margot receives Prince S of Loria, who offers an alliance and a political marriage. Margot shoots it down instantly, and suddenly the entire castle is transported to Loria. Penny uncovers the hoax by rummaging through one of Margot's nightmares. It's all a giant illusion cast by the Lorians. Margot is so enraged by the audacity that she hurls a series of threats and in the heat of the moment accidentally declares war. Carrying your ex-girlfriend under your skin, literally, is far from peaceful. Alice's Niffen doesn't give Quentin a second of peace in the Breakbills library, demanding to be released from the tattoo. Quentin puts his foot down, terrified of what she might do if let loose, even with the entity swearing her only goal is to travel the universe. Out of traditional medical options, Julia and Katie end up at an Asian butcher shop acting as a front for magical rituals. There, one of the owners informs them that this isn't an abortion, it's an exorcism. The price? $1 million in solid gold. Since no one carries that kind of cash around, Julia jokingly suggests robbing a bank, but Katie takes the plan seriously. They even try to scout a magically protected vault, but the invisible security system is so brutal that the poor Haxenpaxen ends up dying to save them. With the Beast gone and no way to camouflage Julia from Reynard, the clock starts ticking. The duo heads back to Breakbills looking for any kind of help. Dean Fogg and Professor Lipson agree that Julia is in a tight spot, but they offer her temporary sanctuary at the school. Meanwhile, the political situation in Fillory goes from bad to worse. Counselor Tick warns Elliot, who supported Margot's aggressive stance until the consequences came knocking, that a declaration of war cannot be undone. Lorien troops are already marching on the borders. The biggest problem? The Kingdom of Fillory is completely broke. There isn't a single cent in the vault to fund an army. With everyone's backs against the wall, the two groups converge at Breakbills. Quentin, Katie, Penny, Elliot, and Margot lay their cards on the table. The conclusion is logical. Fillory needs money for the war, and Julia needs gold for the exorcism. So that talk of robbing a magical bank that previously sounded crazy becomes the master plan. Here's to high-stakes criminality, true Ocean's 11 style, but with wands. Julia's highly anticipated exorcism finally takes place, but the outcome is an absolute disaster. The procedure rips out not only the dark magic but her shade as well. Basically her soul. Now Julia is a walking sociopath, devoid of morals, devoid of fear, and with zero emotional breaks. Leaning into this new pragmatic phase, she accompanies Margot in negotiations with a dryad to allow Fillorian troops to cross a sentient forest. Since Elliot is mysteriously in a coma, the dryad feels insulted by having to deal only with women and rejects the treaty. This is where the new soulless Julia steps in. She returns with a booby-trapped offering that straight up destroys the entire forest. This move infuriates every living plant in Fillory, creating a diplomatic nightmare so huge that Margot is forced to throw Julia in the dungeon. On Earth, Alice's Niffen keeps pushing her luck. She takes control of Quentin's body and forces him to summon a Niffen priest, hoping to learn how to escape the tattoo. The snobbish priest refuses to teach her anything as long as she's a prisoner. Unable to get what she wants, Alice gives Quentin a reality check. His human body simply won't withstand containing a Niffen's energy for much longer. He's turning into a ticking time bomb. Despite all this, Quentin, Penny, and Katie try to stay focused on their mission to find the name of Dana and Reynard's son, since the guy's power might be the key to banishing the god for good. But of course, heavy wards keep the name hidden. Since Penny doesn't know when to walk away from a terrible deal, he signs a contract of eternal servitude with the Netherlands librarians in exchange for a book that holds the answer. And as if mortgaging his own life wasn't enough, Penny also takes a quick peek into Quentin's mind and discovers the little little secret he's been hiding: Alice's Niffin living on his back. The crew now has to deal with a war, a soulless friend, a murderous god on the loose, and a radioactive ex-girlfriend ready to blow up the protagonist. Quentin is locked in a cage, on the verge of death, because he refuses to put Niffin Alice back in her box. While he suffers, Penny and Katie steal his magic button, hop over to Fillory, and break Julia out of the dungeon. The trio investigates and uncovers the identity of Reynard's son, a U.S. senator named John Gaines. They storm his office and prove magic exists in the most blunt way possible. Julia's plan? Kill the senator and steal his energy. Penny thinks she has completely lost her mind, but Katie keeps making excuses for her friend, and they bring the politician back to Brakebills. The problem is that the magical brownouts in Fillory are weakening the school's wards on Earth. Reynard, who already caught wind of his son's kidnapping on TV and made telepathic contact with him, is just waiting for the barrier to fall. When the wards give way, the fox god breaches the campus, and here Julia shows just how cold she's become without her shade. She locks Quentin in the same room as Reynard, trying to force Alice out to fight. Quentin refuses to unleash the monster. Penny tries to save everyone, but Reynard casually freezes them both.
Get back into the ward! Let me out!
Right before the killing blow, Senator Gaines appears, stops his father, and the two vanish together. After this bizarre betrayal, Katie finally gives up on defending Julia and locks her in a magic-proof room. At the edge of despair, and hoping Alice is telling the truth about not hurting anyone, Quentin breaks the box. The Niffin breaks free from his body and shoots into the sky as pure magical energy. Back in Fillory, Elliot preps to duel the King of Loria. Margot orchestrates a whole musical number for the battle, but a magic brownout abruptly cuts it short. Desperate, she strikes a dark deal with the fairies. They will fix the wellspring, and in exchange, they get Elliot's baby. Margot just forgets to run this by the child's parents, and the sacrifice quickly proves pointless. Elliot returns from the duel victorious, announcing he is simply going to marry the King of Loria and split the magic 50-50. Dean Fogg lets Julia out of the holding room, reminding her that Brakebills is a school, not a penitentiary. The vibe is pure hangover for Quentin, who is self-medicating with Josh's magically spiked pastries after releasing the Niffin, and it hits hard. Under the influence of a multi-dimensional cake, he hallucinates Julia Shade, a 12-year-old version of her, lost in another world. He warns Julia, who confesses she's exhausted from having to fake morality by memory, as she no longer feels any natural instinct for what's right. Their search for the Shade leads them back to Dean Fogg, who reveals that the Timeline 23 version of Alice was obsessed with the afterlife. Using an incredibly dangerous spell called the Tesla Flexion, they tear a fold in reality. Quentin has a chat with alternate Alice, who explains that shades go to the underworld and can only be accessed via an ancient guardian. Julia cracks the riddle in seconds. They need to find a dragon. Meanwhile, Penny's contract clears, and he officially becomes an employee of the library. Katie sticks by his side to try to find a practical how-to guide on killing gods. Their search leads them to track down an overdue book held by Harriet Schiff, a deaf woman who hides heavy magic tutorials in clickbait sites, like a magical underworld BuzzFeed. Harriet returns the book but plants a curse on the return card. When a librarian touches it, the curse compels him to try to open a secret door. The guy literally prefers to trigger a lethal trap and die rather than open the place. Zelda, the head librarian, explains that this is the poison room, where forbidden books are kept. And guess what? Harriet left a clue that the god-killing book is right in there. In Fillory, preparations for Elliot's wedding are in full swing, but he's panicking, convinced the people hate him. Josh brews a potion to force everyone to like the king and ends up tracking a rebel conspiracy to the woods. But the real problem lands right in Margot's lap. She finally tells Fen about the fairy deal involving the baby. Fen rejects the idea instantly and runs off to complain to Elliot, but a fairy intercepts her in the hallway, and the two vanish into thin air. Elliot's fiancé, King Idri, arrives for the wedding, but the festive mood dies when he, Josh, and half the palace suddenly turn into rats. With Fen missing, Margot goes to confront the fairies. The fairy ambassador denies causing the rodent plague, but admits she took Fen to their realm because Margot tried to pull a fast one. When Margot finally confesses to Elliot that she traded his baby as payment, the king loses his temper and throws her in the dungeon. Elliot manages to use magic to turn Josh back into a human, but the effort is brutal. When Josh suggests holding an election to make governing easier, Elliot is suddenly expelled from Fillory, landing right back on Earth in the old Brakebills cottage. The monarchy didn't handle the idea of democracy very well. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the royal translator slips Margot a potion. She downs the vial and vanishes, heading straight for the fairy realm. At the library, library, Penny is stuck in the tedious job of shelving books, supervised by an insufferable teenager named Sylvia. His ultimate goal is to break into the poison room. He enters Katie's dream looking for ideas, and Sylvia herself shows up there, offering to help him pick the lock.
Okay. So what's our next move?
Man, I'm fucking cursed.
Oh, I hopped into your mind when you hopped into hers. It's a little trick my dad's friends taught me.
Your dad's...
Speaking of gods and break-ins, Senator John Gaines begins testing his mind control powers under Reynard's mentorship. But when the senator realizes he can manipulate his own wife, his conscience kicks in. Disgusted by his own father, he runs away and knocks on Katie's door, offering his help to destroy Reynard. Quentin and Julia's master plan involves going to Greece to bribe a dragon with the Fillory magic button. The creature blows on them, and the two end up in an elevator descending to the underworld, which, oddly enough, looks like a hotel lobby. With the help of the deceased Richard, and by hacking the front desk's files, they discover the Elysium VIP area. There, they find the lost shades. Alice's shade is still completely in love with Quentin. Julia's shade warns them that they can only take one of them back. When it's time to use the escape portal, Quentin steps through first. But Julia, calculating to the very end, decides that living without a guilty conscience is way more useful. She leaves her own shade behind and shoves Alice's shade through the portal. Quentin and Julia show up at Breakbill South, pressuring the ever-grumpy Mayakovsky into using his magic reserves to resurrect Alice. The process requires the energy of 100 master magicians, but the spell works. The shade is merged with the Niffin, and human Alice is back. The only catch is that she hates every second of it. Stripped of her Niffin omniscience, she feels fragile, is disgusted by humanity, and pushes Quentin away. Meanwhile, Penny and Sylvia dive into the Netherlands and find the poison room, which ironically just looks like a messy, dusty basement. Penny finds the book to kill gods, but the room's radiation starts frying his skin instantly. Sylvia is unable to escape, and Penny is forced to jump back alone, landing straight in the campus infirmary. On Earth, the now exiled Elliot and Quentin track down the buyer of the clock that serves as the first portal to Fillory. And guess what? The guy is Umber. The Fillorian god everyone thought was dead. Turns out he faked his own death to escape his chaotic brother Ember, and now spends his time creating a perfectly boring pocket world shaped like a baseball. In Fillory, Josh has the brilliant idea of getting high, and ends up drinking a potion that drops him right into the fairy realm, because of course that would happen. Back on Earth, Julia and Katie's plan to lure Reynard demands a brutal price. The trickster Fox's son, John Gaines, uses mind control to force Katie to kill him, transferring his power so they can forge a single god-killing bullet. When they finally summon Reynard and Julia has her finger on the trigger, Our Lady Underground appears. She simply whisks Reynard away, revealing that he is her son. Katie is furious at the act of mercy, but the goddess leaves a consolation prize for Julia. Her shade is returned. With her shade back, Julia's conscience hits her like a freight train. She is swallowed by panic attacks and guilt, but she doesn't have much time to cry. Elliot recruits her and Quentin for a near-suicide mission, convincing Ember not to destroy Fillory. The problem is, the god only cares about entertainment. To grab his attention, Josh and Margot, who had to sacrifice her own eye as a toll to leave the fairy realm, throw the biggest orgy the castle has ever seen, fueled by magic weed cupcakes. Ember shows up, devours the cupcakes, but still thinks the world is too boring to be saved. That's when Julia plays her ace in the hole. She shakes Umber's magic sphere, hurling the runaway god and Quentin right into the middle of the throne room. The Divine Brothers reunion lasts about 5 seconds before turning into a deadly brawl. Ember kills Umber. In the heat of the moment, Quentin grabs an enchanted sword and runs Ember through the chest. The god drops dead. It feels like an epic victory, but Alice, still readjusting to worldly pleasures like bacon and sex, drops a reality check. The old gods don't let the murder of a deity go unpunished. To them, humans are like cells, and when they turn malignant, they simply amputate, and the amputation comes swiftly. Suddenly, cosmic plumbers appear out of nowhere and start shutting off the universe's valves. Magic is turned off everywhere. 2 months pass. Breakbills is now surrounded by ordinary steel fences, and Dean Fogg is blind again. In Fillory, the fairy army fully invades the castle, while Alice flees across Earth from old enemies who have returned to hunt her down. In the midst of this magicless apocalypse, Julia finds Quentin and shows him the impossible. She snaps her fingers, and a few magical sparks crackle in the air.
So how are you?
Fine.
Oh my god.
With this tiny spark of hope in their hands, Quentin and Julia kick off a frantic hunt to figure out how to turn magic back on. Josh overhears their conversation and, using his infinite party wisdom, suggests they look for a god of revelry. The logic actually makes sense. Ancient cultures used heavy partying to reach out to deities. They crash an insane rager, where Quentin ends up confessing he killed Ember, and Julia shows off her sparks. Surprisingly, the party god couldn't care less about their mortal drama, but he drops a golden nugget of info. Just like everything in life, magic has a back door. While they investigate this new lead, Penny is literally racing against the clock. The radioactive cancer from the poison room is eating away at his body. Desperate, Katie takes drastic action and forces Penny to go back to the library. It's the only place where time and the disease stay frozen. Right after this tense goodbye, Katie is approached by Harriet, who drops a bombshell. Magic isn't completely gone, and there's a group that saw this blackout coming and prepared for it. Far away in Fillory, things are hanging by a thread. Elliot and Margot try to rule a kingdom on the brink of financial and agricultural starvation, but the real nightmare is inside the castle itself. The Fairy Queen is breathing down their necks. Every time the High King and Queen try to come up with an escape or retaliation plan, they are discovered almost instantly. Paranoia hits a peak until Elliot connects the dots and realizes the obvious. The fairies aren't just guessing, there is a mole right under their noses. With the quest for the 7 keys on the table, Elliot wastes no time. He scrapes the bottom of the royal treasury to repair his ship faster and sets sail for an isolated island that's being terrorized by a deadly flying creature. But the Fairy Queen decides to intervene, forcing Fen and their daughter Frey, who has aged bizarrely fast, onto the voyage. The girl is clearly just there to sabotage Elliot's plans. Ironically, it's her sharp knowledge that saves the day, helping take down the flying beast and securing the first golden key. Meanwhile, the Breakbills crew is hunting down Professor Mayakovsky and any magic batteries he might have left behind. They try to recruit Katie, who wants absolutely nothing to do with Julia, but Quentin plays dirty, reminding her that Penny's life is on the line, and Julia proves that there is still a drop of magic left in the world. Convinced, she joins the team. Josh manages to track Mayakovsky through some bizarre internet videos, leading the group on a wild goose chase across the city for a mysterious woman who apparently turned the professor into a bear. The journey is chaotic to say the least. It involves an imaginary dinosaur brought to life in a children's hospital and a group practicing sex magic in the middle of Central Park. Just a regular day. In the midst of this madness, they bump into Alice, who is carrying a mysterious cat and is also after the batteries. And while Katie finally gets the answers she needed, Quentin gets the short end of the stick and ends up captured by the exact creature that was hunting Alice. Julia tracks down Quentin, asking for help to find Katie and the magic battery. The problem is, Quentin is possessed by a bizarre creature called a lamprey, and he simply turns his back on her to go hunt Alice. Left with no choice, Julia finds Katie on her own. She and Penny are prepping a demon summoning ritual to try and cure his magical cancer. Julia hustles to gather the missing supplies and the ritual goes down. A demon actually shows up and pulls the poison out of Penny's stomach, but the guy has the brilliant idea to astral project right at that exact moment, which sends his physical body into total collapse. Far away, Alice rushes to her parents' house to try and save them from the lamprey. Her mom gives her the usual warm welcome, which is to say, awful, but her dad listens to the warning. That's when the possessed Quentin breaks in. But the creature realizes Quentin isn't the ideal target and ditches his body, going after a host that will hurt Alice in a much worse way.
How do I know you're the lamprey?
How to prove it? I'm not. It's gone. It left.
In Fillory, Elliot is just trying to figure out how to use the new golden key when pirates hijack his ship. Margot discovers the mess and strikes a quick deal with the Fairy Queen just to make it to the boat in time to negotiate. Tick even offers to steal Margot's sacrificed eye back while she deals with the Pirate King. The negotiation, however, involves much more than she bargained for. When the plan threatens to fall apart completely, Margot doesn't back down. Instead, she reminds everyone exactly why she earned the title Margot the Destroyer. Penny is dead. Well, his physical body is dead. And the crew's reaction to his passing isn't exactly what he expected. dead. Trapped in the astral plane without even basic ghost powers, he is forced to team up with Hyman, a guy who has been stuck in this form for ages. Penny tries everything to communicate with Alice, Quentin, Margot, and Elliot to save his own body, but every attempt is a frustrating disaster that leads to almost nothing. While he despairs in the afterlife, Katie is in the real world suffering through the loss and having to make the worst possible decision: what to do with his body. On the royal ship, Margot is cornered. She is trying to deal with the very real possibility that Elliot is dead, all while quietly plotting a way to get rid of the Fairy Queen. True queen multitasking. But Elliot isn't dead. He just activated the golden key, stepped through a magic portal, and landed straight in the Netherlands. Now, he and his newfound family have to figure out how to survive a pack of starving cannibals. Just another normal day for royalty. Back at Brakebills, Julia and Quentin drag Dean Fogg into the hunt for the next key. The search leads the trio to a literally buried section of the campus, connected to a family of former school donors. As expected, unearthing the key also means unearthing some of the university's darkest secrets. Locked in a psychiatric hospital, in the ward for uninsured addicts, because reality is unforgiving, Katie gets a visit from Alice. She hands over the truth key and leaves the room so Katie and Penny's astral version can have a moment alone. The vibe is far from romantic. Frustrated and heartbroken over failing to save him, Katie snaps that she would kill him if she could. A tense outburst that, ironically, is recorded by the hospital's cameras and is soon used by a doctor to keep her locked up as a danger to others. At the cottage, Quentin and Elliot discover that an old Chatwin clock acts as a portal. The catch? The keyhole only appears when Margot sends bunnies screaming for help. She is about to be forced by the Fairy Queen into an arranged marriage. But in Fillory, Margot actually perks up when she meets her groom, Prince Micah, who is absolute magazine cover material. The two exchange vows, the mood is perfect, and a second later, an axe swings down from the ceiling and decapitates the prince. His younger brother, Fomar, immediately steps up to the altar. Apparently, Fillory operates with incredibly practical rules of succession. With no time to lose, Quentin and Elliot turn the key in the clock and jump back into the past to solve an ancient magical mosaic. What seemed like a simple quest turns into a lifetime. Far away from everything, they build a routine, become lovers, start a family with a woman named Ariel, raise a son, and grow old together in absolute peace. It's only when Elliot dies of old age that Quentin, while digging his partner's grave, finds the final piece of the puzzle, revealing the next key. He gives it to a young Jane Chatwin, helping set up her time loops. In the present, Margot, dodging Fomar's advances, opens a wedding gift, a basket of peaches with a letter from an elderly Quentin, and the key. After an encounter with Jane Chatwin in the Clock Barons, Margot bursts into the cottage at the exact moment Quentin and Elliot are about to step through the original portal, stopping their journey. The loop is closed. Time magic erases the key from Elliot's hand, but when the two bite into the peaches Margot brought, the memories of a lifetime of love and companionship hit them all at once.
Well, you guys got to loop out of your shitty past.
I got it.
Concurrently, Julia uses the truth key, looks into a mirror, and finds herself face to face with Our Lady Underground. The goddess reveals the brutal truth. The magic left in Julia came from Reynard's seed. It is a horrifying inheritance, but the goddess makes it clear that the power now belongs solely to Julia, something a desperate Alice is willing to do whatever it takes to steal. With the weight of a lifetime's worth of memories and the magical universe collapsing, power transfer becomes the top priority. Julia and Alice strike a deal to pass the magic from one to the other, but Penny warns them that the spell is way too unstable. The solution is to turn to Dean Fogg. He doesn't hide his annoyance that Julia lied about still having magic, but yields after seeing a demonstration of her power. However, having a professor supervise doesn't prevent a disaster. When the time comes, Alice tries to force the energy absorption, while Julia panics as the connection triggers her trauma, causing the whole thing to spiral out of control. In Fillory, the political pressure doesn't let up. The Fairy Queen demands Elliot use his influence to make Margot consummate her bizarre marriage with the teenage prince. Playing the game, Elliot takes Margot and the guy to a forest famous for its aphrodisiac properties, because of course, a place like that exists in this kingdom. But the king has tricks up his sleeve. The forced romantic getaway is actually a disguised mission, and the two end up stumbling upon a massive conspiracy involving the fairies, which completely changes the power board in Whitespire. While the royals deal with espionage, Quentin and Benedict descend into the depths of a place known only as the Abyss, looking for another key. The dark journey takes an even more chaotic turn when they bump into a lost Brakebill student down there. What should have been a rescue mission quickly pushes them past the point of no return, plunging Quentin into one of the darkest corners of the quest so far. With the fairy's secret in their hands, Margot and Elliot decide it's time to play hardball. Their strategy is pure extortion. They hide the Fairy Queen's eggs at Brakebill's, guarded by a student, and issue an ultimatum. Either the Queen reveals the fairy's presence to all of Fillory, or the eggs are toast. The plan had every right to be brilliant until Frey decides to open her mouth and rat out the hiding spot. The Queen wastes no time flipping the script, threatening to kill Frey if the eggs aren't returned. The girl, thinking she has the upper hand, tries to stand up to the ruler, only to be humiliated and rejected in the process. Emotionally shattered, Frey finally drops the bomb. She was never Elliot and Fenn's real daughter. With the leverage back in her favor, the Queen finalizes the deal, but makes sure to leave a nice parting gift, tossing the High King and High Queen right into the middle of a mob of furious Fillorians. While royalty struggles to avoid getting lynched, Earth has its own logistical issues. Quentin and Poppy tip off Katie and Penny that Harriet and a library creature might be their ticket to the underworld. What follows is a low-budget Ocean's 11-style heist, disguises, a fire alarm, and Katie finally busting out of the psych ward. But freedom comes at an absurd price, and Harriet collects her debt by demanding Katie break into and rob the library. At the core of magic, things are collapsing. Alice survived, but Dean Fogg rules that she needs to give back the energy she absorbed, putting the responsibility right back on Julia. Alice, who is one step away from losing her mind due to magical withdrawal, goes as far as letting a bizarre creature bite her just to try and hold on to the power.
Leave, or I break it.
Now Julia has to dig deep and find a way to protect her friend from herself before Alice's obsession ends up killing them both. In the underworld, Penny uses the dirtiest tactic possible to get what he wants. He threatens to drop fake Game of Thrones spoilers. The cheap blackmail works, and he reaches Benedict, who doesn't have the key, but points him straight toward the librarians. Along the way, Penny runs into Victoria, now very dead, who reads his future through a book, and leads him to the author of the whole thing, who, bizarrely, is an Alice clone. By reading about the chaos his friends are facing, Penny manages to locate the 5th key, and figures out a way to send it to the land of the living, right before Victoria straight up betrays him and hands him over to the library on a silver platter. Meanwhile, at Brakebill's, Julia and Fenn make a disturbing discovery. Irene's fairy slave Skye has had her leg amputated. And here's the macabre part. It was the exact ingredient Julia needed for the incredibly powerful magical concoction she wanted to make. Unaware of this, Katie, Harriet, Poppy, Quentin, and Olivia try to build a mirror bridge to infiltrate the library. Alice warns them that without exact math and magic, it's a suicide mission, but since she refuses to help, Poppy just steals her notes. The group manages to break into the place, but the search for the key Penny supposedly left turns into a total mess. Running through the corridors, they run into Alice herself, a massive dragon, and Zelda. It becomes clear that priorities there are completely misaligned. Alice just wants to find a way to finish her Niffin plans. The rift between her and Quentin only widens. Katie loses sight of Penny, and Harriet reveals her feud with the library is pure family drama. She is Zelda's daughter. Quentin and Katie escape the collapse of the mirror bridge and pop up in the physical kid's cottage with Alice and the 4th key. The quest book reveals a new chapter in the form of sheet music. Katie sits at the piano, plays the right scale, and suddenly, the empty house transforms into the scene of an insane party. No one there is familiar, except Todd, who announces the king of the rager, Josh. The only rule of the house is to feed the vibe. Todd, who is usually a total zero, is acting like the boss of everything, handing out magic in exchange for fun. Meanwhile, across realities, things are much less festive. In Fillory, Elliot and Margot face an angry mob. Tick, fully dropping his friendly advisor act, condemns them to the infinite waterfall. On Earth, Julia tries to teach Skye magic, but the fairy's collar reacts, nearly killing her. The sheer panic makes Julia's eyes glow, freezing the scene in time. She is literally leveling up into a goddess. Back at the party, Quentin, Alice, and Katie uncover the truth. This Todd is actually a pleasure demon, siphoning Josh's happiness and keeping everyone in a pocket dimension. The fifth key is hidden inside the piano, jamming the E key. As soon as they retrieve it, the key's magic telepathically connects the minds of everyone involved in the quest, no matter which world they're in. It is absolute chaos. Margot is about to drop down the waterfall. Julia has a bleeding fairy. Penny is at the library, and the group is at the party. Quentin realizes the only way out of this is by working together. Inspired by a poster on Josh's wall, he casts a spell, and everyone starts singing David Bowie's Under Pressure. The collective harmony saves them all. The energy revives Sky. Margot and Elliot's ship flies back up the waterfall, and the demon is satisfied enough to kick the group back to the real physical kid's cottage, where the book reveals its 6th chapter. Trapped in the library and hating every second of the book club, Penny wants out at any cost. Sylvia ends up revealing a peculiar escape route, a sort of underground subway accessed through a pig's mouth. Penny has no idea where the train will end up, but he steals a ticket and decides to take the risk. After all, anywhere seems better than there. That's when Hades shows up. The god of the underworld doesn't bring threats, but a heavy philosophical proposition. Penny can try to return to the mess of a life he had, or stay at the library and use his time to build something better. In the world of the living, the vibe between the protagonist and Alice is still terrible. Even without trusting each other, the two team up with Josh and head to Fillory. The mission leads them to sneak through the castle's throne room to find the next clue for the key, but the constant tension between the ex-couple makes even espionage unbearable. In parallel, Margot and Elliot do what they do best. Using pure manipulation, they set up a secret meeting with the leaders of the other realms to try to stop the war and forge an alliance against the fairies. Speaking of the fairy race, their fate is put on the line by Julia and Fen. Desperate to free the enslaved creatures, they seek out the distrustful Fairy Queen. After revealing that her people only fled to Fillory because they were hunted to near extinction by magicians on Earth, the Queen agrees to help. But the plan requires a massive sacrifice. She has to put on one of the submission collars. When the collar removal machine fails miserably, the Queen is forced to make an impossible decision. She chooses to save the fairies in need over protecting her own species' hierarchy, but she leaves a dark warning that this choice will bring drastic consequences. Josh and Julia drop into Timeline 23, that chaotic universe where Alice is the sole survivor. Alternate Josh asks for help, but the truth soon comes out. It's a trap set by him and a very much alive Marina to hand them over to the beast on a silver platter. Except Julia is no longer the same. She shows off her new near godlike powers, which is enough of an argument to convince the duo to switch sides and help her get the key. Their search leads the group to a library where they find the bodies of this reality's Elliot and Margot. Julia wastes no time and grabs the spell that this Alice used to kill the beast. On the way out, fate deals an interesting card. They bump into the alternate version of Penny. The guy simply plants a kiss on Julia, revealing that, in this timeline, they were soulmates. After the initial shock and a few explanations, Penny agrees to join the team. Back at headquarters, the plan is to wait for Martin Chatwin to show up. But the person who walks through the door isn't Martin. It's a shadeless Quentin, completely unhinged and ready to kill everyone. Julia and Penny combine magic and teleportation to escape by the skin of their teeth. They track down alternate Alice to a Fillorian boat full of rabbits. Yes, radish smuggling is a thing. Alice confesses she helped bring this Quentin back and hands over the weapon needed to stop him. The group heads to the Chatwin fan shrine Quentin set up, attempting a surprise attack that goes completely sideways. Alice ends up dead in the clash. Out of options, Julia forces Alice's shade into Quentin. The reality check hits hard. Realizing the monster he has become, Quentin takes his own life, but not before revealing a vision of the next key, and the future isn't looking bright. Julia won't restore magic, but rather unleash something far worse than the beast. Back at the cottage, Penny 23 tries to wrap his head around the madness of the Seven Keys quest. Katie hugs him, thinking he's her boyfriend, but gets a rude awakening with the whole alternate universe's explanation. She takes the opportunity to warn him that the Julia he loved has changed a lot after her trauma with Reynard. In Fillory, Elliot, Finn, and Margot discover that Frey is working at a bar and dating a bear. Margot, surprisingly, supports the interspecies relationship, which ends up becoming a political masterstroke. Since the Fairy Queen demands that Elliot and Margot be the official rulers to negotiate, they call for the kingdom's first democratic election. Tick enters the race with tedious proposals, while Elliot banks on pure, unsustainable charisma. In the end, Margot takes the crown, elected through protest votes from the millions of talking animals who want the right to marry humans. She quickly strikes a deal with the Fairy Queen, securing the 6th key in exchange for land and rights for the fairies. Back on Earth, Julia continues to test her powers. She cures Dean Fogg's blindness and resurrects the entire sentient forest that had been destroyed. The girl is basically performing daily miracles. But Katie and Penny 23 have another focus, tracking down Renard. When they finally find him, the scene is pathetic. The all-powerful god is now a miserable, bearded pizza delivery guy, carrying the god-killing bullet that Hades himself gave him to end his suffering. They realize that vengeance has already been served, and leave him to rot in his mediocre new life. Meanwhile, Quentin deals with the classic protagonist burden. Alice reveals that the library's device will control magic, and if the normal flow returns, Quentin's father's cancer will come back too. He visits his dad, tells him about Fillory and the entire life he lived in the other timeline, and decides he's going to finish the quest, whatever it takes. The journey suffers a casualty right out of the gate. The goddess Iris informs Julia that she is now a full-fledged deity and must abandon the quest. She accepts, but before vanishing, she leaves a charge of magical energy with Quentin. The group discovers that the architect mentioned in the book is Calypso, now the CEO of a gaming company. She explains that Prometheus forged the keys to find jailers for Castle Blackspire, a prison on the flip side of Fillory that holds something terrible. Meanwhile, in Fillory, Irene continues her fairy hunt. Left with no way out, the Fairy Queen makes the ultimate sacrifice. She offers her own life in exchange for a magical deal that permanently prevents the library from hunting her people. Irene accepts and coldly executes her. With the prison's location, Quentin uses Julia's magic to contact Aura, the castle's guardian. The plan is for her to distract the monster while Quentin takes over as jailer. The group arrives at the volcanic landscape beneath Fillory, and Aura leads them to the creature, who looks like a bored teenager. Ignoring Quentin's sacrifice, Elliot shoots the monster with the god-killing bullet. A golden mist escapes the body, enters Aura, and she vanishes. The chaos escalates when Alice, convinced that magic only brings destruction, steals the keys and melts them down. The end seems inevitable until Julia ignores the divine rules and returns. She sacrifices her newly acquired godhood to forge new keys with her bare hands. They unlock the fountain, and magic finally returns. But the victory lasts exactly 5 seconds. Dean Fogg and the library's team show up. They install a siphon on the fountain, monopolizing the universe's magic, and Fogg wipes the entire group's memories with a potion. Suddenly, the magicians are living normal identities on Earth, with no memory of what they've been through. Quentin is now just Brian. Walking down the street, he is approached by Elliot, except it's not really his friend standing there. With his eyes glowing red, the monster warns him that he can't wait to start playing. Kimber D'Antoni has just received an invitation to take the Breakbills entrance exam, which would be great if she had the slightest idea that magic exists, but Dean Fogg knows exactly who she is. This is Julia's new identity, and he is determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Meanwhile, the rest of the group lives peacefully under the disguise spells Fogg cast. They saved magic, but now they live without it. Katie has become Sam Cunningham, a police detective. When she runs into a somewhat unhinged hedge witch, her instincts kick in. The problem is that Fogg's spell is aggressively protective. Every time Sam tries to investigate the magical side of things, bizarre events occur to stop her, ranging from a fried computer to the ceiling nearly collapsing on her head. Even so, Sam finds a clue, a comic book called A Flock of Lost Birds. She starts tracking down the characters and finds Janet, none other than Margot, now a fashion editor. Janet is dealing with her own issues, having visions of the god Ember and trying to ignore the fact that her fairy eye is still active. The two manage to gather Penny and Josh, also under new identities, and try to discuss what's happening without talking about it directly. The reunion gets even weirder when Marina shows up to try and explain the situation. Far away from there, Alice is serving time in the library's prison, facing the harshest sentence ever created for overdue books. And the guy in the cell next to her is literally Santa Claus. True to his reputation, he spends his time reminding Alice that she is, deep down, a good person. Stripped of any disguises, Quentin and a possessed Elliot are in Greece, preparing to summon the god Enyalius. The golden rule, according to Elliot, is to never mention Ares in front of him if you want to keep breathing. In Fillory, Margot's Janet version wanders the realm until she bumps into the Lord of the Fresh Waters of Fillory, or simply Lord Fresh. He hands over her birthright box, warns her that she will learn what it means to rule alone, and sends her to find the god invading her dreams. Fillory, by the way, is in chaos. The air is heavily polluted and the locals are dancing naked in the streets. Everyone thinks it's due to Ember's return, turn, but it's actually Bacchus throwing the greatest divine party ever seen. In the library's prison, Santa Claus proves he has his contacts and teaches Alice how to access magic through the facility's pneumatic tubes. She wastes no time, tunes her vision to a cockroach, and begins reconnoitering the area. In the normal world, Marina has already seen through the disguises and plans to break the wards by casting the same spell on Dean Fogg to turn him into his father. Fogg knows the end is near and sets Todd to work, writing his memoirs. He has a way to reverse it all, but it would put the students' lives at risk. Salvation ends up coming from Julia Kimber herself. Believing she is failing her classes miserably, she throws herself repeatedly against a perpetual battery until she overloads it. The magical explosion destroys all the illusion spells. The fake identities drop, which means the ancient monster controlling Elliot's body can finally track down the rest of the group, and he's not coming over for a chat. The reunion at Marina's apartment is abruptly interrupted when the monster shows up with a simple goal: kill all of Quentin's friends.
Mis hermanos!
Where were you? We looked everywhere.
Stay back. Why?
Because I'm not here to play.
Margot barely makes it into the lobby before bumping into Timeline 23's Marina, who warns her about a god-incapacitating trap in the apartment involving a golden chair, a bell, and a lethal dose of ambrosia. Faced with the unstoppable creature wearing her best friend's face, Margot strikes a deal. She promises to lead the monster to Bacchus and knock him out in exchange for the group's survival. Since Josh is Bacchus's drinking buddy, he gets drafted for the mission. Across town, Quentin, Katie, and Penny 23 corner Marina. She admits she only helped them to collect a multi-million-dollar bounty. 3 Deweys, coins charged with pure magic. She agrees to leave them alone for 5. To get this fortune, the team needs an unlimited magical black card forged by Frankie Gallo. To pay the forger, Quentin enters an underground magic tournament, wagers Penny's traveler services, and wins the seed money. The catch is that Frankie's luck spell demands cosmic balance through a teddy bear. Quentin ends up holding the bear and absorbs all the bad luck in the universe. While Katie and Penny make the withdrawal with ease, Quentin spills soup on himself, gets attacked by a python, and, at the peak of his bad luck, receives a text from his mom saying his dad has finally lost his battle with cancer. In Fillory, Josh plays his part and drugs Bacchus. The monster drags the passed-out god to an open field. Bacchus wakes up, recognizes the monster, and admits they locked him up because he devoured gods. The monster's response is to rip a glowing stone out of Bacchus's abdomen. Back in New York, Katie pays off Marina, adopts a box of stray puppies, and takes over the apartment for herself. Julia sits with a devastated Quentin, trying to convince him that their sacrifices made the world a little less dark. Meanwhile, Alice is kidnapped in the library while searching for her friend's life books. Just another normal day for this group. Quentin gets the worst possible call. His dad has died. The task now is solitary and heavy, taking apart the model airplanes that were the old man's trademark. Showing up to keep him company is the monster, wearing Elliot's body. To an ancient and lethal entity, the concept of human grief is an absurd mystery. He doesn't understand why Quentin isn't out there killing people to ease the pain. The bizarre middle ground they find is smashing the planes against the wall. In a twisted way, it's exactly the catharsis Quentin needed. Far from this melancholy, Josh is dealing with his own nightmare, the quickening. It's basically a sexually transmitted lycanthropy, and his body is demanding that he pass the curse on, either by sleeping with someone uninfected or by killing a person. Since becoming a murderer or a predator isn't in the cards, he and Margot go on an absurd mission to stop the transformation. Meanwhile, Alice's attempt to escape the library takes an unexpected turn when she bumps into Christopher Plover. The two fugitives, carrying the weight of horrific past choices, strike a deal of convenience. He helps Alice access her friend's books, and she helps him find a new world to hide in. Over in Fillory, Julia wants to find out why she became indestructible. Her search leads her to a Maynard named Shoshana, who has the perfect diagnostic ritual. The only catch is that Julia needs someone who worships her body and soul to make it work. Penny 23 steps up to the plate without batting an eye. The ritual's result shocks even the Maynard. Julia isn't just powerful, she is a full-fledged goddess, and an awestruck Shoshana has just become her first devotee.
You weren't bullshitting me when you said you were a goddess, were you? I have a new deity to follow.
Oh boy.
The body might be under the control of an ancient psychopath, but Elliot hasn't disappeared. His consciousness is tucked away in a happy place inside his own brain, the only refuge where the monster can't reach him. There, he meets Charlton, the monster's previous victim. The good news is that there's a door that can give Elliot control of his own body for a few seconds. The bad news is that the path to it is a straight trip through his worst traumas. In the real world, Margot has to swallow her pain and announce to the Fellorians that Elliot is gone. She focuses on retrieving her birthright box, but the kingdom itself seems to be collapsing. The first sign that things are going off the rails, all of Fillory's talking animals suddenly lose their voices. On Earth, Julia's one-member fan club is working in overdrive. Shoshana tries to help, but in an amateur slip-up, she drops the cloaking spell hiding Julia. It's enough for the goddess Iris to track them down. Iris isn't here to offer congratulations. She demands that Julia trap the monster using the blood of a living stone. Without magic, Julia is forced to ask for Quentin's help. And as if the apocalypse wasn't already knocking on the door, Alice discovers from Quentin's book that he only has a few days left to live. She dispatches Plover to the poison room, a cold, calculated betrayal, and rushes to warn her ex. The reunion has all the pent-up tension you'd imagine, but Alice refuses to leave before helping him rewrite the lethal ending to this story. Penny 23 and Marina wake up locked in a cage by Daniel, a time mage who wants to deport them because their atoms are disrupting the magic of his timeline. He uses a cube and transports everyone to timeline 23, but forgets one crucial detail. Magic doesn't exist there. The cage shuts down, Penny clocks him in the face and escapes with Marina. She tries to pilot the cube, fumbles the gears, and they drop into timeline 36, a fascist nightmare where regular humans hunt down magicians in the streets. Meanwhile, Quentin and Julia keep helping the monster rebuild his original body out of stone organs, hoping that, in the end, he will abandon his current host. Trying to translate a hieroglyph, the monster breaks into a museum and simply reanimates a mummy to clear things up. Back at the apartment, he gets bored and starts recklessly pushing Elliot's body to its limits. Quentin stands his ground, threatening to stop helping if Elliot's body dies. The monster, needing them, backs down. Over in Fillory, Margot needs a trade agreement to get the beats that will cure the talking animal's loss of speech. Josh tries to teach her how to use diplomacy, a completely alien concept to her. When dialogue fails, Margot takes a more direct approach. She threatens the rival ruler's alpacas. However, Josh makes the mistake of saying she handled the situation better than Elliot. The comment strikes a nerve, causing Margot to snap and cut ties with Josh on the spot. In Modesto, Alice is staying with Sheila, a woman who unknowingly uses magic to track things down. After teaching her friend a bit of the mystic arts, Alice cracks open an invisible magical pipeline and uses the leaking energy to purify the city's toxic water. The kids can finally play in the fire hydrants without getting lead poisoning. The catch is that the magic spike alerts the local hedge witches, who use the power surge to blow up the local branch of the library. Trying to figure out what to do, Penny 23 winds up in a white room with Penny 40, now a deceased and much more zen librarian. The message is clear. Timeline 40 needs Penny 23. Accepting his destiny, he returns with Marina, tells Daniel they're staying put, and scatters interdimensional seeds across the workshop floor, tainting the place's magical purity forever. Checkmate. Down in the underworld branch of the library, Penny is having one of those philosophical office debates with Derek about how books are categorized. The target this time is Matilda Fremont, filed in the disappointing prodigies section. Penny argues that the butterfly effect matters in her story, since the girl saved her brother, who would go on to become a massive global philanthropist. But honestly, Penny only cares about his friends. He asks if Derek has read the group's books. The answer is frustrating. Derek only gave them a quick skim, just enough to see Alice blowing up a college library just to open an order magic conduit, and Quentin and Julia using a mummy to hunt down another one of the monster's organs. Just a normal Tuesday for this crew. The problem is how Derek sees the group. To him, Quentin and Alice fit perfectly into ill-fated romances or well-intentioned failures. The rest of the gang, all filed as secondary characters on epic quests. That hurts Penny's ego on an almost personal level. Derek drops a truth bomb, reminding him that Quentin is the center of the story. After all, it was him that Jane Chatwin chose from the very beginning. Never losing his cool, Penny claps back, saying Derek only kisses Quentin's ass because the two of them look alike physically. Sometimes, the biggest challenge in the underworld isn't eternity, it's dealing with highly opinionated librarians. Back on Earth, Alice and Zelda need to join forces to rescue Sheila. The catch is that the solution requires a visit to Alice's old house, which means facing some forced family therapy. She and her mom have to swallow their differences and work together on a spell to help Zelda navigate the mirror realm. All this while Dean Fogg watches watches from afar, hoping the mission's success will score Brakebill some extra magic rations. Priorities. Over in Fillory, Margot and Fen are still hunting for the green-cloaked woman from Fen's dreams. They find a cabin and end up being used as cheap labor, forced to fix the mess left by pilgrims at the site. The cabin's owner explains that the entity they're looking for is basically the Napster of dreams. She only exists in there. Fen doesn't give up, manages to capture the figure, and finally wrings out the answers about her great destiny. Meanwhile, Quentin and Julia's search for the monster's stone brings them face to face with the East River Dragon.
Why the hell is everybody yelling?
I sent them to find your elixir.
The creature is panicking over a stolen elixir. Quentin, using the dart left by the thief as a clue, tracks the culprit back to the physical kid's cottage. Upon arriving, the surprise isn't a terrifying monster, but Poppy Klein, and she is pregnant. The vibe instantly gets heavy. Katie, Penny, Julia, and Quentin team up to investigate what kind of supernatural mess is behind this pregnancy. The ambient magic situation spirals out of control thanks to the Serpent, a terrorist group of hedge witches. Their tactic is brutal, controlling magic users through bloodworms that kill the host. Katie teams up with Pete to investigate this madness, but Alice interrupts the process early on, desperately needing Katie's help. The rescue of Harriet from the Mirror Realm, led by Zelda, hits a literal wall. They discover that Harriet has been shattered into 3 pieces. Alice takes on the burden of trying to glue the woman back together, but the spell goes bizarrely wrong, and Alice ends up splitting herself in 2. It's the kind of magical blunder that forces you to learn the worst lessons the hard way. On the other end of the story, the trio are hunting the Binder, following the tip given by the dragon. The problem is that the monster decides to hijack their schedule. The entity has discovered a psychic hotline and is trying to use the operators to dig through his own mind and unlock his ancient memories. As expected, a telemarketing psychic's brain can't handle the pressure of a millennia-old force. Knowing this, Penny volunteers. His logic makes sense. If he survived having the beast in his head before, maybe he can handle this unwelcome guest too. While chaos unfolds on Earth, some news changes everything in Fillory. The intel that Elliot is alive finally reaches Margot. With Fen still processing the weight of her own newly discovered destiny, Margot starts calculating her next moves. She thinks she has a way to save her best friend, but the price of the bargain might be her crown. And knowing Margot, she'd burn that throne to the ground without a second thought if it meant bringing Elliot back. Out in the desert, Margot goes on a psychotropic trip courtesy of her pet lizard. The hallucination hits hard, to the point of making her see Elliot singing 80s pop anthems, all thanks to the iPod Josh gave her before she left. The imaginary lizard guides Margot through a wasteland until she stumbles upon a tribe deathly afraid of a local demon. The creature rises from the sand and has a very specific preference, possessing emotional women. Basically a normal day in Margot's life. She has zero patience for demonic drama and focuses on getting the axes she needs to save her friend. Meanwhile, on Earth, Quentin, Julia, and Penny finally piece together the monster's agenda. He isn't just collecting shiny stones. He is building literal organs to reconstruct his sister's body. The tables turn. The mission now isn't to find the organs, but to save the god who holds the final piece. And since nothing in this universe is simple, the hunt requires a leprechaun. The clue leads them to a woman named Barry, who throws them into an escape room-style scenario, only with lethal stakes and no time for amateur riddles. On the other side of the board, Julia and Katie know that to outmaneuver the library, they need an inside man. Zelda is the obvious choice, but convincing her is another story. Her loyalty to the Order is blind, at least until she decides to investigate the ambient magic logs on her own. The numbers don't lie, and the truth hits her like a ton of bricks. Everett and the library's leadership are lying through their teeth, axes in hand. Alice suggests using an incorporated binding to trap the monster as soon as he is expelled from Elliot. The problem is that the only guy who knows how to do this, Professor Mayakovsky, fried his own brain in a botched time spell and now has dementia. Quentin and Alice's solution is to time travel back to talk to the past Mayakovsky. In the midst of this, there's a super awkward situation where future Quentin bumps into past Alice, but the important takeaway is that Mayakovsky performs an invasive test and discovers Quentin's magical discipline, repairing small objects. Not exactly Thor level, but it'll do. Back in the present, Julia, Penny 23, and Margot are trying to decipher the Binder's book. The artifact requires blood to open, and Margot, proving once again to be the most practical person in the group, uses a tampon. Organic magic at its finest. The spell summons a man who reveals his book has missing pages. The culprit is Hyman Cooper, a voyeuristic ghost who stole the pages just to trap Penny and Julia in the room and force them to hook up. Yes, the group has a ghost acting as the couple's #1 fan. With the book restored, the binder tells the truth. The monster and his sister are immortal, discarded experiments of the old gods. He gives Julia the ultimate choice: become human or become a full god. But before she can process it, the monster shows up, decides Julia has the perfect, durable body to house his sister, and kidnaps her. At the library, Katie and Zelda enter the poison room while Fogg creates a glorious distraction in the hallways by pretending to be drunk. They discover that Everett is secretly hoarding magic to become a god, but before they can bounce with the intel, someone locks the door to the room from the outside. Far away, in Fillory, Josh plays hopscotch on an ancient trap and ends up discovering a massive secret reservoir of magic. The monster's plan advances mercilessly. He pins Julia to the floor to transfer the sister. Our Lady Underground even tries to intervene, freezing the villain and telling Julia to make her divine choice quickly, but the sister is lethal. She invades Julia's body and, just to show who's boss, snaps the goddess's neck like a toothpick. In the poison room, Katie and Zelda are about to die of intoxication when they run into none other than Christopher Plover. He is still alive thanks to the beast's immortality spells, and he offers anti-venom moss in exchange for help escaping. Fogg, who managed to infiltrate by turning a librarian into a puppy, comes to the rescue. They escape, but Fogg ends up getting captured by the guards to buy the others time. Down in Fillory, the magical reservoir Josh found came with a heavy curse. Upon touching the water, he turned into a goldfish that will die without constant eye contact with someone. Margot rips out her fake fairy eye, sets it right in front of Fish Josh's tank, and solves the problem in a bizarre and incredibly practical way. Focus shifts back to the main mission. Plover reveals that the only way to drink the magic water without turning into a fish is by making the drowned garden bloom, which requires a declaration of pure love for Fillory. Quentin tries, but he's broken. He confesses that Fillory was just an escape and that reality shattered his illusion, but admits that loving the idea of what the place represented should be enough. The depressing honesty works, and a flower blooms. Quentin and Alice eat the petals, drink the water, and get absolutely juiced up on magic. At the same time, the monster and the sister invade the library, slashing through anyone who crosses their path, looking for a scroll that grants access to the realm of the old gods. The sister corners Fogg in a cell, but before she can finish the job, Quentin and Alice show up armed with axes and glowing blue eyes. The sister just gives a cynical smile and drops a adorable. She pulls the classic arrogant goddess routine, saying she'll keep them as pets. Alice wastes no time and blasts the goddess into the wall. The sister finds it amusing but doesn't anticipate Penny popping up from behind and burying an ice axe into her back. The golden essence leaves Julia's body and goes straight into a flask, sealed by a quick containment spell. The problem is that the spell won't hold. Fogg warns them they're short on time, but Penny can only think of Julia, whose wound keeps reopening on its own. In desperation, he summons the binder, who brings terrible news. Either Julia chooses to become human, or she embraces her goddess side. Otherwise, she'll suffer agonizing pain forever. Since she's in too much agony to speak, Penny makes the call for her and chooses mortality. When Julia wakes up and realizes she's going to age and lose her magic, she is furious. Penny drops the hard truth, saying he'd do it all over again if it meant not losing her. Meanwhile, Elliot's rescue plan goes off the rails. Josh, newly restored to human form, accidentally misfires the residual magic he absorbed from the reservoir straight at the monster's scroll. A portal opens, sucking Quentin and Josh into a bureaucratic office where a guy in a suit dressed for golf warns them that monsters can't be killed, only thrown into the seam of a mirror world, and as a consolation prize, he gives them a cake. The crew sets up the final play. Margot buries the axe into the monster, pulling his essence out of Elliot, while Katie uses a global network of hedge witches to channel enough magic for the ceiling. Flasks in hand, Quentin, Alice, and Penny enter the mirror realm. Quentin tosses the first flask into the seam, but Everett shows up thirsty for power and shatters the mirror, threatening to absorb the other entity. Quentin realizes what needs to be done. He tells Penny to get Alice out of there and uses a basic mending spell on the mirror. The seam reappears. Q tosses the final flask, but the magical backlash disintegrates Everett and swallows Quentin whole. In the underworld, Penny meets Q at the elevator. Quentin wonders if he made a sacrifice or just almost found a way to die. To answer him, Penny shows him his friends gathered around a bonfire, singing and tossing memories into the flames, completely devastated. Quentin realizes that in the end, he changed their lives forever. At peace, he hugs Penny, grabs his underworld Metro card, and walks through the door. Topside, magic floods back into the world. But in Fillory, Margot and Elliot discover that time has sped up. 300 years have passed, and the realm is now ruled by the oppressive Dark King. A month after Quentin's death, grief hits in different ways. Julia and Penny, 23, try to have a normal date under a meteor shower, but random magic spikes nearly turn the weather into a disaster movie. The magic released by Everett's death has overloaded the world and flooded break bills with freshmen. Fogg, with 0 patients left, blackmails Penny with a contract to force him to teach. Penny walks into the classroom, tells them that traveling between worlds is a curse, tells the class to go enjoy life, and walks out. A+ teaching right there. Down in Fillory, Margot and Elliot are trying to cope with the fact that they jumped 300 years into the future. Elliot pretends nothing hurts, while Margot finds out through a stage play that Fen and Josh were executed in the past. She tries to force the clock dwarf to reverse time, but learns that doing so would destroy all of Fillory. Frustrated, she demands that Elliot face the pain of losing Q, and Margot ends up knocked out by a guard and thrown in a dungeon, where she has a ghostly vision of Josh.
It's gonna be okay. Who am I kidding?
Meanwhile, the library is a mess. Katie discovers that the contracts binding the hedge witches are still active, and that the building housing the manual to remove them has simply vanished from the map, along with the memories of the entire neighborhood. And Alice? She runs from every seance, pretends she's going to help rebuild the library's index, but uses the chance to steal a very specific book. Speaking of Julia, a talking pig named Sir Effingham shows up in her kitchen with an apocalyptic quest. The catch? He wants Quentin. When he finds out the chosen one is dead, the pig freaks out, demands a man for the job, and laughs when Julia volunteers. Obviously, this just adds fuel to her fire to save the world on her own. Back at Breakbills, Penny decides to try actually teaching a class and takes the students to another planet. Everything goes well until he tries to read the mind of a student who hears a weird signal. He gets bombarded by a noise so deafening that he temporarily loses control of his own powers. Wrapping things up, Alice locks the basement door, lights candles around a clay golem, and starts casting. Grief definitely doesn't come with an instruction manual. Trapped in the dungeon, Margot tries to understand the sudden appearance of Josh's ghost, while Elliot bumps into Fen's spirit wandering the castle. It's Fen herself, even in death, who drops the idea that they could mess with the timeline to fix the past. To put the plan into action, Elliot steals time dials from Jane Chatwin. She gives the standard warning: don't try to go back in time to save Quentin, or his entire sacrifice goes down the drain. Dials in hand and protected by a highly expensive magical perfume that prevents bizarre time paradoxes, Elliot and Margot start traveling to the past. But altering time is never simple. In one attempt, Margot forgets about Josh's deadly allergy to bees. In another, they leave the fortress unprotected and the castle gets massacred. After so many failures, Margot realizes the perfect plan doesn't exist. On their last available trip, she finds Josh, says goodbye, and gives direct instructions. He needs to grab Fen, Tick, Rafe, and some ham sandwiches, and head straight to the clock dwarf's room to hide from the invasion. The maneuver works, and their friends survive in the past, but it doesn't change the present. The Dark King is still comfortably sitting on the throne. On Earth, Katie wakes up after a casual night out with her memory completely wiped. Turns out the guy she went out with is a professional mind wiper, hired to erase the tracks of the library depository heist. The guy wiped his own memory so he wouldn't have to deal with the guilt, which only pisses Katie off even more. The confrontation inevitably turns into a brawl, but before Katie can extract any useful info, the guy panics, activates a self-destruct spell, and turns to dust right in front of her. Katie and Pete are still in the dark about who the big fish behind all this is. Meanwhile, the sketchy witchcraft Alice was doing in the basement comes to life. The intention was to bring Quentin back, but the spell summons a 12-year-old version of him in the clay body. Julia catches them, flips out, and throws in Alice's face that it's selfish not to let the protagonist rest in peace. But, as twisted as it is, this lighter, sweeter version of him, free from adult trauma, was the push Alice needed. After processing the pain she'd been bottling up for weeks, she finally finds the strength to say goodbye to the boy, letting Quentin go for good. In the forests of Fillory, the mysterious Dark King appears out of nowhere to lend a hand, but what really catches the eye is the heavy flirting he aims at Elliot all night long. Far from that romantic vibe, Alice and Elliot finally address the obvious tension between them. The core wound goes by the name of Quentin. The blame goes both ways. Alice betrayed the group by trying to shut down magic, which forced Quentin to deal with the monster. Elliot, in turn, carries the weight of having rejected his friend's romantic advances in the past, triggering the events of his own possession. At the end of the day, it's a loss for both of them. There is a strong temptation to send a letter to the past and prevent his death, but they know the risks all too well. Just like the butterfly effect, you tweak one detail here, and the universe pays you back with a tragedy 10 times worse right around the corner. The only real path is accepting the grief. Meanwhile, the royals deal with their own disasters. Margot finds out the hard way that Josh and Fen cheated on her together. The kicker? They only confessed because the full moon was going to force the transformation and expose the truth. Fen still holds a grudge because Margot recently tried to kill her, but Margot was mid-werewolf transformation and processing the rage of a double betrayal. The drama in the castle is heavy. To top off the chaos, the harmonic convergence is only 2 weeks away. Julia and Penny have to race against the clock to prevent an event that will cost millions of lives, possibly needing to recruit Zoe and her sister to stop yet another impending apocalypse. The toll of saving the world is heavy, and Katie decides to brave the magical underground to find the book depository stolen from the library. Reaching the etheric realm requires a dangerous method. Knowing Katie's troubled history, Dean Fogg steps in to shoulder the burden with her. The etheric realm is an insane psychedelic trip. There, they meet the Emperor, an entity that looks straight out of the Big Lebowski, acting with absolute chill and sending brown bunnies as spirit guides. He decrees that only one can return. Exhausted from the stress of 40 different lifetimes trying to save worlds, Fogg decides to stay and finally rest. Katie swears she'll come back for him.
I am home.
I'll be back, okay? I promise.
At the library, control has crumbled. Barbarian Visigoths have invaded the halls, plundering magical knowledge to turn a profit on Earth. To protect the most dangerous secrets, Zelda does the unthinkable and torches her own story room, sacrificing her life's work. Fortunately, she has a photographic memory. To save Earth from the harmonic convergence, she gives Alice and Julia the solution. They literally need to move the moon. Meanwhile, Penny's containment spell fails. A mysterious signal starts tearing through his mind, causing seizures and agonizing pain. Julia summons Clarion, the goddess of melody, who agrees to stop the convergence in exchange for mortality. But when Penny collapses, Julia spends her only bargaining chip to save him instead of the planet. Penny survives, but loses his telepathy and his traveler abilities. In Fillory, the Dark King rescues Margot from an attack but soon passes out. Piecing things together, Margot discovers his limitless magic comes from the genocide and torture of fairies. The guy is a monster disguised as a savior, and Margot's patience is wearing thin. Moving the moon is no beginner's spell. Following Zelda's tip, Alice and Julia end up in an asylum to consult a lunatic. The recipe for success is brutal. They must contract moonbrain by staying awake for 5 days straight without using magic, and at the end, offer a moon rock as a sacrifice. The problem is that the owner of the perfect rock is Orrin Westbrook, a billionaire who instantly refuses to lend it out. With no peaceful options left, the group decides on a heist. Margot, Josh, and Penny crash the magnate's party to create a distraction. Meanwhile, Katie uses an illusionary disguise to pose as Westbrook's ex-girlfriend and swipe the artifact. It's a true Ocean's 11 style heist, turbocharged with magic. With the rock secured, Julia, Alice, and Elliot stay behind to cast the spell at the exact moment of the harmonic convergence. Everything seemed perfectly aligned until Marina crashes the location. In the chaos, she and Elliot fire spells at the same time. The energy collides, shoots into space, and the result isn't the moon shifting its orbit, but literally shattering in the sky. Meanwhile, Katie and Zelda locate the stolen book depository, securing the spell needed to remove the lethal mark from the hedge witches. As a bonus, Katie discovers it was Marina herself who robbed the place all along. Back in Fillory, Fen plays spy and tails a fairy prisoner to uncover the true extent of the Dark King's crimes. And as if breaking the moon wasn't disastrous enough, the past comes knocking for Elliot. He starts hearing sinister whispers and finds the phrase, "Let me out," written written in blood on the wall. The monster might have been sealed away, but Elliot's mind clearly still harbors some ancient nightmare. 12 hours. That's the time Earth has before chunks of the moon, courtesy of Marina's disastrous spell, start falling and destroying everything. Chaos has already taken the streets, with looting and people embracing the end of the world in the most creative ways possible. Katie comes up with a plan using a magic surge and an army of hedge witches. It seems solid, but it fails miserably, and the moon crashes into Earth. Only in the blink of an eye, Margot and Elliot are having the exact same conversation from 12 hours ago. A classic time loop. They are the only ones who remember what happened. They try everything, sending an alternate version of Penny to the moon, moving the Earth out of the way. Nothing works. After 10 loops of pure frustration, they discover the culprit is an old perfume belonging to Jane Chatwin. The solution would be to travel 48 hours back in time, but ancient magic is blocking any time travel. Amid the despair, Elliot starts hearing the monster's voice in his own head, asking to be let out, and sees macabre doors appearing out of nowhere. He turns to alcohol to ignore the problem, but in the next loop, Margot forgets everything. Elliot is alone. Following some unusual advice from Josh, he decides to stop resisting and opens the damn door. Inside, he finds Charlton, the monster's former host, who gives him the golden hint. Margot was kicked out of the loop because she got too close to the answer on a beach. Elliot heads there, finds a bizarre telephone wire connected to the ocean, and calls straight to the whales. They explain that the moon's fall broke the magical seals keeping the Kraken asleep. With the beast awake, time magic short-circuited. Elliot's genius plan? Yell at the whales to release the Kraken early, forcing the loop to reset before the chaos. It works. He goes back in time just enough to have Margot punch Marina in the face, canceling the moon-shattering spell. The world is saved. Elliot finally confesses to Margot that he remembers every bloody detail from when he was the monster, and the two reconcile. But the relief is short-lived, as Todd shows up bringing a new mission from the Pigman, Sir Effingham, prevent an apocalypse in Fillory. With no time to catch her breath, Julia decides to hijack Todd's mission for herself, because saving worlds is basically her routine now. While she focuses on that, Margot and Elliot head back to Fillory to investigate the mysterious Dark King, Seb. At Breakbills, the moon's new position has left magic completely unstable. The school's wards collapse, sending Professor Lipson into a coma and leaving Penny as acting dean. Desperate about the magical chaos, Penny, Alice, and Julia use an emergency button in Fogg's office.
Based on the locator spells on it.
This shit messes me up. What the hell, Julia?
Fine. Did it work?
The spell brings the dean back, but he arrives with awful energy, drinking heavily and acting strange. Over in Fillory, the king's advisor Pickwick has exiled all talking animals and now wants to raid the fairy forest for allegedly hidden gold, since the soldiers haven't been paid in weeks. Margot finds the fairies, who now hate her, and teams up with Fen. Elliot, playing the perfect double agent, warns Margot in time to evacuate the camp before Pickwick plants fake gold there to frame them. Elliot's investigation reveals the advisor's bizarre scheme. He's counterfeiting the kingdom's wealth through beetles that literally poop gold. Back at the school, things escalate from weird to dangerous. A Todd from another timeline explodes upon stepping on a magic mine, and Fogg triggers a total campus lockdown. That's not their Fogg. It's Fogg from Timeline 17, the guy who destroyed his own Breakbills and now wants to hijack this version to try again, since he has a daughter to raise over there. Penny pretends to accept a deal to get his traveler powers unlocked, but they trick the fake Fogg and lock him in a magic-proof room, while Alice concludes that the magical chaos is happening because the moon has feelings and is furious about being moved. Things heat up in Fillory. Elliot exposes Pickwick and earns the Dark King's trust. But the Fairy Queen pulls back the curtain for Margot and Elliot. Seb is using the gold to summon the Takers. Knowing that Seb is the source of the Takers changes everything, especially when children start getting kidnapped right under everyone's noses in Fillory. The mission is clear. The Dark King has to go. The problem is he's already survived 7 assassination attempts, guaranteeing he has some heavy protection magic. Elliot hesitates to pull the trigger, so Margot proposes a trade. If Elliot finds the king's weak point, she'll handle the dirty work of getting her hands bloody. To extract this information, they resort to a classic Freaky Friday-style body swap spell. Margot, in Elliot's skin, stays at the castle to seduce Seb's secrets out of him during a sleeping dust attack set up by Julia and Fen. Meanwhile, Elliot, in Margot's body, goes with Josh to hunt down the Blackwood tree, the vitality conduit keeping the king immortal. The charade at the castle almost falls apart because Margot is terrible at emulating her best friend friend's subtlety. Still, Seb lowers his guard. He reveals a tree tattoo on his chest, confesses he bound himself to the forest to save the realm, and in a moment of vulnerability, the fake Elliot approaches Seb, who pulls away, ridden with guilt. On Earth, Alice's investigative arc turns into a Contagion movie. While studying a plant from another universe left by Quentin, a botanist brought in to help gets infected. The guy's chest bursts open, and alien spores start possessing the students, including Penny. Alice negotiates with the spores and discovers what they want, a page about the World Seed, something with the absolute power to grow a new planet from scratch. She tricks the fungus, saves Penny, but the seed becomes the new big target. The pressure finally boils over in Fillory. Fen warns that the realm's ambient magic will bizarrely accelerate Julia's recent pregnancy. At the castle, the assassination goes off the rails. Seb notices Elliot approaching with a knife, but before he can strike back, Julia appears out of nowhere and deals the fatal blow to the king. Margot and Elliot finally take a breath, exchanging that classic moral support reserved for people who just assassinated a head of state, and the dust seems to settle. The only problem? The body on the floor twitches. Seb isn't dead. And proving exactly why he has survived so many ambushes, the Dark King simply comes back to life. Julia and Elliot are in a terrible spot, captured by Centurions and a freshly resurrected Seb. Margot and Fen manage to escape, but Margot left her fairy eye with Josh to keep tabs on him. Meanwhile, Plum Chatwin appears out of nowhere in Penny's office. She had been missing for 3 weeks, but only remembers being trapped in a white, doorless room. Penny tries to teach her how to travel back there, but she ends up messing up and taking them both to 1998. Alice and Katie team up to stop the couple from getting the World Seed page. They discover that Zelda is working with the Hedge Witches to rebuild the library, an unexpected alliance, to say the least. Zelda puts the two of them to work scouring the books in the poison room for a cure for the lunar magic problem. Back on Earth, Margot and Fen step out of the clock and run straight into Christopher Plover. He's spouting complete nonsense, and they soon discover why. He's possessed by insects. Margot uses her axes to carve the bugs out of him, a process she makes sure isn't painless in the slightest. Penny and Plum find a younger Fogg, who gives them a temporal compass. But since Plum's traveling is anchored to the objects she holds, the 1920s compass drops them straight into 1920. Being two non-white people trying to enter a library in that era, the reception isn't exactly warm. They bump into Hyman before he became a ghost and blackmail him. The problem is, this causes his expulsion, threatening the entire timeline. To fix the mess, they trap Hyman in the astral plane themselves and hide his body to save him later. In their cell, Julia drops a bombshell on Elliot. She's pregnant. The moment is cut short by Seb, who forces them to participate in a seance. Obviously, it goes wrong, and Elliot ends up possessed by the king's dead lover. Plover finally drops the big secret. The Dark King is Rupert Chatwin, who bound his life to the intertwined roots of Fillory's trees. As long as Fillory exists, he is immortal. To stop him, they'll have to destroy the entire planet. Plover then announces he wants to leave in peace to write more children's stories, and Margot, in an act of pure common sense, punches the bugs right back into him. Alice discovers she isn't in the library, but trapped in a psychic loop created by the couple. After resisting and losing a few fingers in the process, she gives in to save Katie's life. Penny and Plum manage to return to 2020, but are immediately teleported to the mysterious room. And this time, there is no way out. Things are looking grim for Josh. Seb sacrifices him to the Takers, sending the guy straight to their realm. But when the creature tries to drag him and touches the amulet Seb had given Josh, the beast simply drops dead. On Earth, Margot's fairy eye, which is still with Josh, is activated. This gives her a bizarre headache, a nosebleed, and she passes out. Alice, Katie, and Fen put her to bed and concoct a spell that projects the eye's vision into a prism. Basically, they turn Margot's eye socket into a movie projector. Through the projection, they watch Josh explore this purgatory alongside a little girl. They take an elevator and bump into Penny 40. He explains that Hades has gone off the grid and the underworld is falling apart. Meanwhile, Penny 23 and Plum have been trapped in that room outside of time for a month. Their captor claims to be a protector of space-time, but he's really just a junkie trying to siphon Plum's powers. After a lot of struggle, they make a deal and manage to escape. In the cell, Julia is dealing with a roller coaster of hormones. Thanks to the traveler magic of the baby growing inside her, she suddenly realizes she can hear Charlton inside Elliot's head. They deduce that to tap into the child's magic and escape, Julia needs to feel like her life is in imminent danger. Charlton digs through Elliot's memories of Fogg's old magical sex ed class and creates a terrifying simulation where Julia's water breaks right there in the cell. The sheer panic works. She teleports, steals the keys, and frees Elliot. Elliot. Alice and Katie track down Hades, who is hiding out in Queens, wearing sweatpants and playing video games in a deep depression over Persephone. He refuses to help until they mention the Takers. Hades panics and explains that their realm is the barrier between the living and the dead. If Rupert resurrects his lover, the barrier will break and the dead will devour both Fillory and Earth. Hades agrees to get Josh out of there. Josh returns to Fillory, but the scene is awful. The ground is littered with dead Takers. Rupert has already accelerated his plans. Penny and Plum finally arrive at the apartment just in time for Penny to get the shock of his life. Julia is standing in the middle of the living room, heavily pregnant. Margot and Josh are finally reunited, while Penny and Julia have a surprisingly mature conversation, agreeing to co-parent even though they're no longer together. But the peace is short-lived. Elliot, Fen, Margot, and Josh pass out of nowhere. Since all of them were once High Kings, a remnant of Ember summons them to a pocket dimension. The god confirms what they already feared. The dead are coming to annihilate Fillory, and the only way to stop it is by destroying the planet first. Luckily, Umber's ghost shows up and reveals he built an Ark, a secret world where they can hide all the inhabitants. The problem is that destroying Fillory means destroying the Wellspring and all its magic with it. Alice suggests using the World Seed to create a new planet from scratch, but to do that, they need to steal the instruction manual back from the couple. Since they need a traveler, Penny wakes Hyman from his stasis, giving him a physical body and protective tattoos. Hyman spends his first few hours touching absolutely everything he sees, before starting to plant doubts in Fen's mind about the morality of their plan. To organize the heist, Alice and Katie track down Marina. The catch is that she paid a healer to block her toxic traits and is now annoyingly nice and altruistic.
I'm still learning how to bake, so no judging. Go ahead. You're not poisoned.
She reveals the seed is in the highly secured vault of a hotel for magicians, but they need Marina's ex-girlfriend Anna to get the book with the blueprints to the place. Since Anna refuses to help this new, peaceful Marina, Alice doesn't think twice and breaks the spell. With the old manipulative Marina back, they manage to trick Anna and get the book. Meanwhile, Julia is suffering from constant psychic feedback due to her pregnancy. Penny is terrified since his mother lost her sanity right after he was born for the exact same reasons. To make matters worse, the Pigman, Sir Effingham, appears with a grim warning. Destroying Fillory will cost the lives of the people they love. In Umber's dimension, Fen gets tired of being treated as useless and abandons the group in the middle of a deadly puzzle. Elliot goes after her and miraculously offers a genuine apology. Feeling valued, Fen returns and uses her knowledge of Fillory's scriptures to find the right Ark. Trying to be clever, Penny steals Breakbill's circumstance machine to hide it from the couple, but when he arrives at his cabin, he discovers that the psycho Fog from Timeline 17 has escaped, stolen the machine, and teamed up with the couple, handing them the exact missing piece they needed. The Nave Hotel is basically the Continental from John Wick, but for magicians. No combat magic, no teleporting, and strict rules against scams. The group needs to get in there to steal the World Seed page, and the scheme involves dodging messenger golems that sniff out bad intentions, and a freezing vault. Since the seed requires a temperature of nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit to survive, they plan to duplicate the incubator bag the couple used. The plan kicks off beautifully with Pete smuggling the entire group inside a suitcase. Seeing Elliot, with all his height, climbing out of it like he's in Fantastic Beasts is an event in itself. While Pete distracts the couple, Margot, Fen, and Josh grab the seed. Everything seems under control until Fog from Timeline 17 appears out of nowhere and ties the three of them up. The group's communication relied on a musical spell, but to avoid alerting the golems, they literally have to swallow their bottled-up emotions. And since we're talking about this group, it obviously goes wrong. Alice's bottle breaks during a scuffle, dumping all her trauma back onto her at once and forcing a musical number to throw off the guards. Elliot, seeing her despair, drinks some of her emotions to connect with his friend. It's a rare moment of vulnerability where the two finally lean on each other. Far from there, Julia and Penny visit a psychiatric hospital looking for his mother, Neela. The big plot twist is that she isn't a patient, she's on the staff. The reunion is brutal. Neela confesses that the voices in her head only went away when Penny wasn't around. He watches through the security cameras as Julia tries to reconnect with her mother-in-law, only to be rejected. It's a painful warning about the toll the magical pregnancy could take on Julia's sanity. Back at the heist, it's total chaos. Marina's ex-girlfriend breaks the baton, maintaining the communication spell. The incubator bag's charm dies, threatening the seed. With the couple cornered, Fen makes the quickest and most bizarre decision possible. Margot shoots the golem husband, and Fen shoves the seed into a warm, moist place in her own body to keep it alive. alive. At the very last second, when all options run out, Santa Claus himself steps in and rescues the squad. The morning after the rescue kicks off with Santa Claus delivering early presents. Alice's gift is the World Seed page itself, the push she needed to have something worth fighting for. But the Christmas spirit is short-lived. A bunny brings news that the Dark King is going to open a portal to the underworld tonight. The group splits up for a near-impossible mission. Elliot and Margot head to Fillory to load the population onto the Ark and reverse the Clockwork Heart to destroy the planet. Meanwhile, Alice, Fen, and Zelda stay behind to cultivate the seed and create a new world. In the midst of this tension, Julia's water breaks. In Fillory, Rupert's plan falls apart spectacularly. He thought he was contacting the love of his life, but it was Martin Chatwin in disguise the whole time. Martin stops the door from closing and unleashes a horde of the undead to sweep across Fillory, marching straight for the Netherlands. Zelda realizes what is coming and takes the front line. She instructs Alice to cast the magic one-handed and sacrifices herself to delay Martin, giving up her own life to give the group a fighting chance. In the Breakbills medical ward, Fogg severs Julia's magical connection to the baby at the exact moment of birth, causing Julia's organs to fail. The only way to save her is for Penny to take on the magical burden of his daughter, Hope Quinton. When the transfer happens, Penny not only saves Julia but regains his telepathy whenever he holds the baby. As the apocalypse devours Fillory, Margot heads to the Clockwork Heart ready to die with the planet, applying the lesson of sacrifice she learned from Quinton. Fortunately, Penny rescues her milliseconds before total annihilation. At the same time, Alice and Fen's spell works. Fueled by Fen's vision of what the world should be, the seed blooms. Alice, Margot, Josh, and Fen are sucked into the new dimension, leaving Elliot, Katie, Julia, and Penny behind. The new world is an absolute fever dream. There, Margot frees the Fillorians and embraces her new title, High Queen Margot the Creator. Back on Earth, the aftermath is bittersweet. Elliot returns to teaching at Breakbills, and thanks to a magical bracelet, Charlton assumes his own physical form, giving Elliot the chance not to be alone. And just like that, the cycle is complete.
And that's how I know it's our story.